30 seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the July 10th Apex Planning Board meeting to order. Please bow your heads for the invocation. Father God, thank you for the opportunity to serve the town of Apex and the residents thereof. Give us the guidance to make the best decisions for the town and the residents of the town. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Diane, do we have any items of information this afternoon?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I did forward you additional information about the Reagan Road Side Path project that came up at the last meeting. And just for the members of the public, we did look into the concerns about the historic property as well as the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission property, and have determined that the original project alignment is not feasible, and we will not be pursuing that project.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about public comment. Public comment is the time for the public to speak on items that do not appear on this agenda under public hearings. Any member of the public wishing to speak on public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time later in this agenda. If you've not done so already, please sign in at my right, your left, on the particular item of interest. I will ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes in length, and I will let you know when to wrap up. If you have someone that's going to speak on behalf of your group, they will get a total of 9 minutes and should not be repetitive in nature. We'll now move on to the consent item number 1, the minutes from the June 12th regular meeting. I'm taking everybody has read it. Any questions or comments? Or a motion to approve?
I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Motion from Tina, second from Melissa. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. We will then move on to item number 1. Shannon Cox, long-range plan, is going to have a discussion about the thoroughfare. But first, I need to get a motion to recuse Keith.
I will make a motion to recuse Keith from item number 1.
Thank you, Alyssa. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Tim will second. Thank you. All in favor of recusing Keith from item number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Hello, Shannon.
Hello, good afternoon. So the first amendment, just to orient you, is north of US 64, and it's between Jenks Road and Goodwin Road. And this is an amendment, a proposed amendment to the Thoroughfare and Collector Street plan map to add a future local connection from Goodwin Road to Jenks Road. Local connections are typically 50 feet in right-of-way. They are lower classification than our collector streets. And you can see that this alignment, this future local connection would be built by 2 projects that are in the review process. A portion would be constructed by Arden at Summit Pines, which is currently in construction plan review, and a portion would be built by Apex Light Industrial, which is in site plan review. So the purpose of this amendment is to really be transparent that this roadway is being constructed in parts by these approved developments. And if redevelopment occurs in the future between these intervening properties, then we would be requesting or requiring, depending on the type of plan, that roadway be constructed and connected. This local connector is also consistent with the US 64 corridor study that the town participated in with NCDOT, Wake County, Chatham County, Pittsboro, and Cary. And you can see this is US 64 here, and a lot has changed on the map since this study was done. But it shows Jenks Road being realigned and an interchange being built here. And then what we know is Lowell Road coming from here and heading west on different alignment, but same idea, that instead of direct access, these properties would have access to a roadway off of US 64 and then be routed back toward an interchange area. Planning staff recommend supporting the proposed amendment. We've also reviewed it with staff in transportation, infrastructure and development, police and fire, and all were supportive. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
A few questions. If you intersect with Goodwin or Godwin, I think it's Goodwin Road, does that allow full movement on Highway 64, or what movement is that?
So eventually, according to the US 64 corridor, so right now it would be probably a right out only based on the 64 corridor study, not full movement. And
Yes, asked another way, if the Apex Light Industrial and the Ardent at Summit, and then assuming the middle properties get built today and connect to Goodwin, would there be like a restriction on Goodwin at 64 today? Or is that like when the future corridor?
I'm not sure what's required of Apex Light Industrial, Russell. Left turn crossover. Left turn crossover.
Okay. The other question is the improvements on Jenks and Highway 64 that are currently underway, if not getting close to be completed, does that include a signalization now? Like, are they actively signalizing that? Do you know?
That's another question for Russell.
All right, thank you.
I'm glad he's here, as always. Anything else?
Questions for Shannon?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so, guess we'll have some public comments on this one. Mr. Roach?
Mr. Skinner, Chair, members of the Planning Board, Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design. Just real quick, I want to, as the engineer working on the Apex Light Industrial side, I just want to let you guys know that the developer of the project is in support of this. They see the benefit for their project getting access out to Goodwin Road, with the one thing to be on record that the alignment from Goodwin Road to Jenks can vary in the middle as the developments needed to go either north or south to better support their projects. But other than that, I just want to throw it out there real quick that the Apex Light Industrial guys do support this connection out to Jenks Road. So with that, I appreciate it.
Thanks, sir. Any other public comments on this one? Now I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion. Clear cut?
Clear cut.
Do I have a motion?
I have a question. Are there any frontage on the new or proposed or existing frontage on the new local connection street? Like homes or businesses?
So a local connector street would allow driveway access. The Ardent at Summit Pines is a high-density residential congregate apartments. And so there's, not single-family residential driveways there. And then Apex Light Industrial would be office, commercial, industrial type driveway access. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
Do we have a motion?
I'll motion to approve the amendment to the thoroughfare and collector street plan.
I have a motion from Melissa. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Tina. All right. All in favor of item number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right. That passes unanimously. And I need a motion to bring Mr. Keith back in, please.
I move to bring Keith back in.
Tina, a motion to bring Keith in. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Tim seconds. All in favor of bringing Keith back in with us, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right. Welcome back, Keith.
Thank you.
All right, Shannon, you're going to talk to us about a possible motion regarding the amendments to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map and bike map.
Yes, so these amendments are along and adjacent to East William Street between future Jesse Drive and Reunion Creek Parkway. We'll start with the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map. So to orient you to the exhibit, this is East William Street, so we're south of US 1 in this location. And this is Technology Drive, and where East Williams kind of splits into 55 and 55 bypass. So the proposed amendment to the bike ped system plan map is to add a proposed grade separated bicycle and pedestrian crossing. We use grade separated so that it doesn't solidify whether it would be a bridge or a tunnel, but in this case, probably a future pedestrian bridge. We are requesting that this be added because there is an active NCDOT project to improve this intersection. With those changes, a pedestrian or cyclist wanting to cross from one side of East Williams to the other will need to cross 9 lanes of traffic with multiple turning movements. We have future side paths on both sides of East William Street, a lot of development occurring here. So I want to make sure that we're planning for the future and propose adding this to our plan. The remaining amendments are to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map in the same vicinity. And we'll go through these in numbered order here. The first amendment is to remove the future interchange shown on our plan now at Technology and 55. And that's associated with that NCDOT project that I just mentioned. As part of that study, DOT evaluated multiple interchange concepts, as well as a reduced conflict intersection, or RCI. You might know it as a super street, and you're familiar with it in Holly Springs. The interchange concepts were about 20 million over the budget. They were about 50 million, and they were impactful to existing residential areas. They really restricted access. So they are moving forward with that RCI concept in this location. We don't anticipate further improvements to be made in the future in terms of an interchange, so we would like to take that off of our plan. The second amendment is to remove the future interchange at future Jesse Drive, so that's this purple line shown here, future 4-lane median thoroughfare, and East William Street. This is not a staff request, this is a developer request. And the reasons cited for the request is, based on the funding and what happened at Technology Drive, it might be anticipated that DOT won't have funding for an interchange in this location. It is restrictive to development. It restricts access to development that might occur along the east side of East Williams. And the Jesse Drive feasibility study that Kimley Horn completed for the town showed that RCI alternative could work based on the 2045 horizon year when that study was completed. The third proposed amendment is to add a future major collector street between Reunion Creek Parkway, which is this pink line here, and Colby Chase Drive. When NCDOT held the public meeting for the improvement project at the Technology Drive intersection, there was substantial public concern from the neighborhoods in this area about the new restrictions in access. In particular, there will only be left outs at Reunion Creek Parkway, a traffic signal's planned in that location. And so all of these different neighborhoods, if they want to head south, will be going through residential streets to come out onto Reunion Creek Parkway. Also, there'll be a lot of potential traffic just right at the entryways in this location. So not as part of that DOT project, but for our future plans, we're recommending that we add a major collector street to kind of serve as a backage road for East Williams in this location, allow for those movements between neighborhoods and out to Reunion Creek Parkway on a collector street instead of those residential streets. And a major collector street would not allow residential driveways, so that also restricts some impacts there. Related to that addition, amendment number 4 is to realign and upgrade the future Colby Chase Drive extension. So you can see it with these X's. Colby Chase on our map now kind of sweeps to the south, and that would not work with this new major collector. So we're proposing that realignment and then the upgrade so that there wouldn't be those residential driveways right there adjacent to East Williams. And then we did try to think about future development and how that parcel where we're adding these collector streets could develop in the future, and try to align those roadways that would allow for possible future development. The fifth amendment is to add a future major collector street between Gladsong Drive, which is this roadway shown here east to west on our plan, and Jesse Drive. And that is really to allow connectivity between uses parallel to East William Street. This is already the busiest part of East William Street, and we expect that to continue in the future. So as development occurs, that connectivity on either side will be very important, especially if future interchanges are removed. And then that major collector would make it so residential driveways would not be allowed. And then finally, the last proposed amendment is to shift future Jesse Drive slightly south. This is to align with the feasibility study that the town completed. And the map just needs to be updated based on that approved study. In terms of staff recommendations, first programmed projects. So the project that I noted at this location is programmed, that's funded by NCDOT. None of the other roadways or bike ped facilities shown are currently programmed. Planning staff recommend approval of all of the proposed amendments with the exception of amendment number 2 shown on this map. We do understand the funding constraints and the issues for development with an interchange shown here. But at this point, we don't have enough information to recommend removing it from the plan. Well, the feasibility study did show that a super street could function here. It was based on a 0.5% annual growth in traffic along the corridor. And historically, growth has been 1.5% between 2005 and 2021. At 1.5%, traffic operations would fail with the RCI. In addition, we don't yet know what operations will look like once 540 is actually complete. It's included in our model, but as far as actual operations, what happens at the Perry Road interchange shown on our plan could impact traffic volumes here. And we don't have good traffic studies that show this is not needed. So at this time, we would recommend leaving it on the plan. These amendments were also reviewed with staff in traffic, police, and fire, and all were supportive of the planning staff recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, Shannon, if I understood you correctly, staff is requesting approval of all except for number 2.
Yes, so, the bike ped amendment and all thoroughfare and Collector Street plan map amendments except for removal of the interchange at Jesse Drive.
I do have a few questions. So the DOT HL 0007, the interchange at Technology was $20 million over, it was $50 million, and it just wasn't in the funding mechanism. So they went with an RCI. And I guess to further that with the Jesse Drive, if funding is similar, which it probably wouldn't be as much because it's not that much of a unique intersection such as East William and Technology and the other old Highway 55, but in similar scope, who pays for that? Like if we leave it on the map, like presumably the development on, I guess, Viridia on one side and the future folks on the other side, like $50 million, if we leave it on there, they're on the hook to build that?
No, so for development, what they're required to build needs to be proportional to the impact that they have. And to my knowledge, we haven't had a development build an interchange like this. Typically, the right-of-way is provided and dedicated through the project if it's on the plan. But the actual construction of the interchange would most likely be state or federal funding of this magnitude, and it's a state road. So with the Technology Drive intersection modification, that funding came through a specific source. It was bonus funding for the tolls on 540. And that's why it had a very specific time limit and a very specific amount. If the Jesse Drive interchange is constructed in the future, it wouldn't be from the same bonus allocation funds. It would go through the regular prioritization process.
I guess in similar fashion, the collectors that we're reconfiguring to allow, relief off the Highway 55 corridor, those would presumably be done because when development happens adjacent to them, that seems a little bit more commensurate in scale.
Yeah, typically collector streets are constructed with development, so yes.
So it made sense when you said that, like, you squared it off to allow for something that would be hopefully more dense, that we could fund that.
Yeah, and typically collectors are needed by development as well, for connectivity and access.
Shannon,
Oh, go ahead.
Shannon, with the future alignment proposals and the realign upgrade of Colby, does that affect any existing property lines, neighbors on that?
So the private property would be affected by these new roadways shown on our map. And getting at what Ryan was saying, you know, they would likely only be built if those properties are redeveloped. It's not typical or very unlikely that the town would move forward with building a collector street on private property. The way that we've drawn them, they wouldn't impact existing residences.
Shannon, going back to the number 2, and I'm honing in on this one because I'm trying to understand, you know, I understand the staff component where, you know, you don't know what you don't know today. So it's hard to say, oh, we don't want to get rid of the possibility that we might need it in the future. Met with the reality is we have Viridia coming, a known quantity, and it sounds like there's an assemblage on the other side that are coming. What are they to build to if we leave it as it is today? What's the condition? What kind of right of way do we dedicate? What kind of like street geometry do you lead into that intersection? If maybe a bridge isn't warranted today, the RCI may be. So do you build the RCI today, make that an interchange, and then allow for the grade separation in the future? I'm just trying to understand, like, what's the trade-off?
Yeah, so, I mean, you're building to what's required by the traffic analysis and working with Russell and NCDOT, you know, to accommodate the traffic generated by that development. As far as right-of-way dedication, this particular location is a challenge because we don't have a conceptual design for an interchange. So what exact land area will it take? I don't have an answer for that. A lot of locations like the US 64 corridor study, you know, we had a conceptual interchange for a lot of those locations, and we don't have that here. So it would be a process of, you know, working through that with the developers.
So the adding of the future collector, the green area there, that would connect those regions to 55. There's not going to be any other connectivity other than that?
So, like for example, north of Jesse Drive, you know, if it's non-residential development, the UDO does include a provision that requires cross access between different developments when you're fronting on a thoroughfare like East William Street. So there would be connectivity. We wouldn't have a public roadway on our plan.
And would that be the same for Colby Chase? And what is it, Strawberry Lane? Strawberry Avenue?
Stray White?
Stray White, yeah. So those two also would have the same restrictions?
So there could be cross access, like a parking lot aisle, you know, driveway, something like that. The public roadway is per plan. It's just hard to know those details until you actually have a plan for development.
Right. Any other questions for Shannon? All right. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Roach, if you'd like to speak.
Mr. Chair, I'm still Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design. Guys, I appreciate it. And Shannon and I have been working for months on this because we represent the property owners that are on the east side, the ALA commercial, the Jesse Drive area. And I'm here specifically this afternoon to talk about two of the requested amendments. Item number 2, which of course staff is not recommending approval, and then item number 5, which kind of go hand in hand with one another. So related to the removal of the future interchange, we look at it as it's exactly the same thing as HL 0007, which is the West Williams, East Williams, Technology Drive interchange going away with a $50 million price tag. The Jesse Drive Phase 2 study showed that through 2045, an RCI would work for our intersection, which is this one here. So you can only imagine what the cost is going to be in 2045 if a bridge is ever needed here. So staff is recommending approval of removing HL 0007, but not removing one half a mile up the road. And so we don't really understand We also believe that there is no design for this. Unlike the 64 corridor where DOT did a long-range study, on the previous one for Lowell Road, you saw DOT's long-range plan. There isn't a long-range plan for here. So what's happened is Jesse Commons was rezoned around 2010. It's been 10 or 12 years, and it sat there waiting for sewer, waiting for water, waiting for roads. Well, now that the town is starting to move forward with phase 1 of Jesse Drive and the eventual extension of Jesse Drive out to 55, and Horton Park is currently building the mid-region wastewater treatment plant. So utilities are now available. Connectivity is now available to residential development in the area. Viridia is starting to develop across the street. Lennar has hundreds of homes coming online soon. So now you get the need for additional commercial development in this location. So this property has gotten a lot of interest. But the minute somebody looks at the transportation plan to purchase this property, they're asking, what is this future interchange? What does this do to the development opportunities for the property? And nobody can answer that question other than, we don't know. We don't know when, we don't know what it's going to look like, we don't know how much it's going to cost, we don't know if it's reasonable to expect that the town or DOT is going to build this bridge, or because this is a commercial development, we don't know what the density is really going to be. So it may come back to the developer actually has to build this because it's what's required to get their traffic to work getting on the 55. So there's a lot of ifs. The one thing that's consistent is that HL 0007 has removed the interchange requirement at that location. There are no other interchanges all the way up to US 1. Why are we leaving an interchange at this location at Jesse Drive and 55? So the client, the property owner is very concerned that this is going to impact him for another 20 years because he doesn't know what's coming. Along that, the second point was item number 2, which is to add the future major collector. So this is kind of like a, hey guys, in the event that you do remove the future interchange at Jesse, we want you to add this major collector here. And we're not opposed to connectivity. Shannon mentioned it directly. The UDO requires interconnectivity between non-residential developments. What form that is, whether it's a local connection as you just saw with Lowell Road, whether it's a minor collector for residential, or whether it's a major collector, depends on what the development is. In our case, we're zoned for non-residential. Why would we put a 60-foot public right-of-way that doesn't allow residential driveways through a shopping center? It just doesn't make sense. So what we're asking for is 2 things. Remove the future interchange from Jesse at 55. The second is downgrade item number 5, which is a future major collector, from either a major collector down to a minor collector, or even farther down to a local connection, because the ordinance already requires the connectivity per code. So the minute we come up with a site plan, even if it's not a zoning condition, even if it's not on the transportation plan, staff, Russell, Shannon are going to ask us for that connectivity, and we are more than happy to provide it. We want to get down to this east-west major collector here. It's called Gladsong. It's coming out of Horton Park now. We want Jesse Drive. We want these developments. We want everybody east of 55 to be able to get to either Gladsong to go east-west to 55, to go north through these retail developments to get to Jesse and go to 1010, or to get out to 55. So having these connections are great. We just disagree with taking it all the way up to a major collector on a 60-foot public right-of-way through the middle of a shopping center. So with that, I'm here tonight just answer questions and get on the record. Something that we are doing, ALA Commercial, the owner of the property, has enlisted or hired Kimley Horn, who also did the town's phase 2 study for Jesse. They are also evaluating this to see what the option is, to see if a bridge is really required, even with a 1.5% growth rate for the next 20, 25 years, to see what's really going to be required. We're just getting on the record tonight, basically telling you guys that we're doing this work. We hope that you guys will support remove the interchange, and then this will be heard at council probably in August. Shannon, is that correct? You're planning on August for the transportation? So yeah, this will be in front of council in August, giving us a little bit of additional time to get our traffic engineer moving on evaluating this future interchange removal and then the north-south major collector. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions about what our plan is for this. I've got 3 clients down this whole side that are all being impacted by changes to the transportation plan. So with that, I will stop talking and answer questions or sit down. So.
Any questions for Mr. Roach?
Jeff, you'd mentioned that the commercial would otherwise require a major collector 60 foot going through what could be a pedestrian oriented development. What would be an alternative that you would propose that would move traffic through there in a safe fashion that would meet the intent?
So the intent has always been with major collectors, minor collectors, is start-stop points. How they get there is really up to the development. And we're open to working with Shannon and Russell to get through any type of development. I think the current layout for ALA commercial had like big box or medium-sized junior tenants where the major collector sits here without parcels along the 55 frontage, the McDonald's, Burger King, the Bojangles that's there now with a road behind it. That road behind it would act as that north-south collector street. Like I said, there'd be plenty of opportunity for connectivity, either parking lots, driveways, local connections, minor collectors. The major collector just feels weird coming through the front of a shopping center. Mr. Akers, I don't have a great answer for you, except to say that the owners of ALA Commercial are all for connectivity to the south, because that's most likely going to be either high density residential or additional office commercial space south. They want those people coming in. They want those people shopping, getting gas, going to the grocery store, whatever those retail uses are. So, and not to mention that Mr. Akers, this back here is also a minor collector that's already on the plan. This is also on the ALA commercial property and also goes north-south. So there's multiple, and staff's done a great job of putting lines on the plan to make sure that this connectivity is there. I continue to just say that this location may be off a little bit, and going all the way up to a major just seems a little heavy-handed at this point. And if we come back and we need to make it a major collector future down the road, I don't think the client has an issue changing it once all the dust kind of settles and he truly has a client knocking on the door saying, here's what I want to build. He can always upgrade to a major collector with no driveway access in the future. But again, Mr. Akers, driveway access is tied on a major collector to residential development, not commercial. I think Shannon, have as many points as you want on the major collector with commercial. Generally speaking, it's not tied like residential development with single family homes cannot have access on the major collector, where commercial driveways can. It just feels weird coming across the front of a shopping center, Mr. Akers.
So, Mr. Roach, I'm going to ask for some clarifying points.
Yeah.
So I'm, again, imagining, I'm trying to picture this big box setup in which there is potential for pedestrian. I'm not going to speak ill of our neighbors to the north. I'm picturing a crossroads kind of a thing, which no one's walking through.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm trying to see, no one's walking through crossroads. I might argue.
Right, but not to interrupt, but I don't envision this road coming across. I envision it as 2 lanes. I don't think you're going to have Crossroads Boulevard with the 5-lane median divided. That's not what's going to happen. It's going to be a 2-lane with sidewalks. But
and that's I'm sorry, is with the future major collector as proposed, is your fear that it's going to be a crossroads level 5-lane?
No, it's just putting the public right of way through there. Typically, you don't, in a commercial development, you don't split the project between the buildings and the parking lot with a public facility. You let the private owner of the shopping center own all the parking lot, all the drive aisles. And if there is a public road, it's around the perimeter, it's a ring road. It's not cutting right through the middle of the site.
Okay.
So that's the biggest concern.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Second point of clarification. You just posed the question of, could we not just have it be a major collector street downgrade, and we can upgrade if we need to? So I'm going to turn that back and say, I hear your concerns. I want to be honest and say definitely err on staff's concerns. Because, right, I mean, if you're sitting in these rooms long enough to know that what is the big concern that's going to come from neighbors, it's traffic. And I just named Crossroads. We can all talk about our concerns about Crossroads. Traffic. And so it's going to be a very hard sell for me to say, staff is trying to hear the concerns around traffic from our neighbors. And you're wanting me to negate concerns around traffic. So while we could upgrade later, why would we not err on dealing with the concerns of the neighbors, concerns of community, dealing with traffic, and then if we come back and this isn't working for a proposed project, then we come back and talk about downgrades. Because I think I think it's a very valid argument to make, but
right.
when we're still in the hypotheticals, I don't know why we wouldn't err on dealing with the situation at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a problem. I'm not here tonight saying, oh my gosh, I can't live with a major collector. I don't have a site plan. The goal was to make it a little bit easier and not have to come back when they have a plan saying we need to downgrade this. And now I really have to make it successful. I have to get the downgrade from major to minor or major to local connection to have this project work. I'd rather not have it, period, and let the development community work it out because the connection is required anyway. If they come back and they change the zoning and say, we're going to change this from retail to residential, now staff and council can ask for anything they want. They can ask for this connection. They can require it at the zoning stage. What I'm saying is based on the current use, which is retail, that having a major collector through the site doesn't make sense because the connection's required anyway. Right. That's all I'm saying. I am not here tonight to say this is the wrong choice. I'm just pointing out that the major collector is there in the event that the future interchange at Jesse is removed. Staff, I think, and I don't want to speak for staff, so I'll rephrase that. My opinion is that the major collector was added for when the future interchange is removed from the plan, which is my hope, that a connection is shown on the transportation plan from Gladsong in the south, which is here, up to Jesse Drive. That's why I think it was added. That's my personal opinion. And I agree with that. I agree there should be a forced connection from Gladsong to Jesse. Does it need to be major or can it be a local connection? That's the only thing I'm asking staff and the planning board to question. I'm not questioning adding it to the plan. I'm not really even questioning tonight. I'm just getting on record saying I disagree with it's a major collector. So in 2 years, if somebody comes back and we're knocking on your door again, hey guys, remember me from 2 years ago? I was here talking about this, and here's why we're now asking to downgrade it to a local connection. So Ms. Sherman, I'm not arguing that it's a major or minor. I'm just getting on record saying we disagree that that's what it should be now. A connection will be required. What that is to be determined.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks.
But I'm really more about removal of the future interchange at Jesse and 55. That's really the big one. That's the huge
and
check that
and then for me it'll come back to it will come back to concerns around traffic and dealing with those concerns up front. So I hear both of those. I wanted to be clear sort of what those concerns were, and I absolutely look forward to again listening to what the neighbors say, right? So traffic being one, and definitely look forward to coming back asking for an amendment for a new shopping center that's going to bring some business to the town.
I hope so. I appreciate the input.
I have a question about number 2, removing the future interchange, and for Shannon or Russell. Whenever you are accessing federal or state money for a transportation project, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't it need to be shown on your local plan in order to show town support that you want this, that you are requesting funding for a future project? Don't you need the plan to support that in order to request funding from a
Yes, so definitely helps. I wouldn't say if the town was requesting it, yes, it needs to be on our plan. A lot of projects on roads like 55 don't have to be a town request, but it definitely helps for a local plan to match the metropolitan plan and the state plan. And it's, I think, very rare that the state would move forward with a project that was completely unsupported by the local jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Shannon, I have a question about Gladsong. What's the classification of that road?
So Gladsong, this roadway would be a future major collector street.
Shannon, do you know off the top of your head, major collector, the difference between minor and major is primarily the speed limit, correct? and vertical design.
Yeah.
So the idea being you want to push more vehicles with speed through to get higher volumes, correct? I'm thinking like Beaver Creek, the road that goes right through Beaver Creek. You're trying to get as many cars through there as possible. Would that be consistent in my thinking?
Yeah, so I think it's 5 mile per hour speed difference between the two. The right of way is the same. The other major difference is residential driveways would be allowed on a minor collector street, and they're not allowed on a major collector street. And Russell and I were chatting a little bit about, what concept do we have for this future interchange? And the Southwest area study that we did with the MPO back in, I think, 2019 did have a concept for this interchange. It was not the same level of a concept as completed for like the US 64 corridor study. But the idea is that there would be a network of streets like the major collector that we're showing that would provide access back to East Williams, and then a bridge at Jesse Drive, and potentially have development around that. So it's not to the level where I could like say this is the area that we need specifically, but an idea that we could work with development as it moves forward.
What would be the process if, again, I mean, there's no plan out there. We just heard that necessitates its removal today, but if there is a plan that comes down the pipe in the future, we may be having this conversation about, is this really warranted? My question though is, like, if this is commercial, there's going to be a lot of pedestrian and vehicular friction. And do we really want cars going faster around commercial? I don't know, but I feel like with the way this town is currently headed as far as being pedestrian centric, slower speeds would be something that I would support. But then again, you need to push vehicles through. So is there a compromise that you can do a different street sections, still get the need for the interconnectivity, but maybe and maybe this is a Russell question, I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, do we need to push cars through at 40 miles an hour? Well, I guess it'd be design 40, posted 35.
So I believe it's 35 and 35 for major collectors, design and posted. Yeah. So I think it's really hard to have that conversation without a plan in front of us. And I would be happy when a plan comes forward, like Jeff was saying, that we have that dialogue and look at the overall layout and, what street section is really needed here. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to have this potentially important roadway connection parallel to a very heavily traveled corridor. Thanks.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, do we have any public comment on this particular item? I don't think we have anybody checked in. All right, then I guess I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion.
I'll say that I'm conflicted.
Yeah, definitely am. Definitely am. I mean, there's a lot there.
Because it's just like, I mean, we all know 55 East Williams, like driving through to get to Holly Springs is dicey, spicy. And, removing that bridge or an interchange would potentially not bode well for future with like Viridia and everything else that's potentially in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. That also said, if you're driving toward Holly Springs, the only other, I feel like, major interchange is like the 540 interchange that's going through there. Everything else is not that. So, kind of where I am.
So Diane, keep me honest. As it's written, it's all or nothing. Are we able to chop it up?
You can make 2 recommendations.
Okay, thank you. That being said, do we have any motions?
I I've been on the other side of this very conversation. It was Depot 499. We were being asked to make a bridge crossing over 540, which at that time the planning board couldn't support. It didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. This one is a little bit different because, I mean, that was just ludicrous. I mean, it would pale in comparison to $50 million. This one, you know, could be close, but I still think that that sticker shock, the reality of a bridge happening there, is likely nil. However, if we change it, then to Ms. Sherman's point, or no, I'm sorry, it was your point about Ms. Bird's point about the funding mechanism. That's an interesting, I didn't think about that, but what is the reality that a bridge, I mean, we still are working on our bridge over South Salem, aren't we, with the town? It's hard to build that magnitude of infrastructure. I think the only bridge I've ever seen built by a developer was that small thing in Chatham County, Chatham Park. I mean, this is not that. I understand the issue on that one, and I am working on Viridia, much bigger, but again, it's a big deal.
I'm not conflicted. This seems incredibly straightforward to me, until there's until we have, I understand and appreciate where the developers are coming from, but I think until we have a plan before us, I don't see the incentive of deviating from the proposal that the staff has recommended. I absolutely see, if we have something, projects come before us, rehashing these conversations and having these conversations. But I think until then, it's very nebulous, and we're making changes without. A really great point on the funding issue. I think we're making changes for reasons, but very nebulous reasons. So I would make the recommendation, or I would make, why is my brain not working? A motion to concur with staff recommendations. And I'm trying to read them to make sure I get them correctly, to approve all the proposed amendments with the exception of Amendment 2.
All right, so we have a motion from Tina to approve all as written except for amendment number 2. Do I have a second on that?
I would agree with all the points you made, and by no means do we want to add lines to a map that then deter development. But I think, again, we've shown as this board and staff that those things can be changed with future requests when there are site plans. So I will second that motion.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing?
No.
2 dissents. So I guess we need to have your dissent notes written up. Sarah, not to call you out, did you say aye or no?
I said aye.
Thank you. I guess the vote passes as written with 2 dissents. Keith Ryan will need your notes, please. And we're gonna move on to item number 3. June Cowles is gonna discuss with us possible motion of rezoning case 23 CZ04, the Castleberry Reserve PUD.
I was going to say good afternoon or good evening.
Good evening, Jim.
June Cowles with the Planning Department. This is a rezoning case 23 CZ04, Castleberry Reserve Plan Unit Development. The rezoning case is located in the northwestern section of the town area. And the proposed rezone or project site is located south of Castleberry Road and west of Wimberley Road, right along here. And north of, down here is the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission game land, which is the protected open space. To the north, Lake Castleberry Estates, subdivision in Castleberry Estates is over to the east side. This property is outside the town limits. And the current zoning district is Wake County 80. And the proposed is planned unit development, conditional zoning. The current 2045 land use map is rural density residential. So the proposed rezoning to PUD includes a maximum density of 2 units per acre, which is inconsistent with the rural density residential, that's 1 unit per 5 acres classification.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
It's inconsistent because they're requesting 2 units per acre. And with the rural residential, that's 1 unit per 5 acres.
Thank you.
So if the properties are rezoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map will automatically be amended to low density residential, and that allows maximum 3 units per acre. So on this slide shows the existing conditions. There's mature trees, several streams bisecting the property, with the grade sloping towards the southern section of the project site. Currently, there's some single-family residential with accessory structures, and this yellow line right here is an existing gas line easement. There's also a cemetery, I believe it's right there. And it's Mills Cemetery, and it includes approximately 59 grave sites, and it's been in use for over 180 years. So the project applicant had a neighborhood meeting December 7th, 2022, and then had another one April 19th, 2023. And so looking at the proposed PUD plan site layout, you can see that there's a northern district and then the southern district. It includes a maximum of 179 units. That's 2 units per acre. The building height is 45 feet, 3 stories. The uses are residential use, single family and accessory apartment, park greenway, recreational, private amenity, and the cemetery, which they plan on keeping on site. So in the table, it shows the proposed lot dimensions. For the northern section, minimum lot size would be 6,000 square feet, 50 feet would be the lot width. And then the southern section in the brighter yellow would be 75 feet wide and 10,000 square feet lot. The proposed minimum setbacks are in the table. They're the same for the 6,000 square foot as the 10,000 square foot lots. The proposed buffers are 20 feet wide, type B around the perimeter, and then a type 30-foot type B along Castleberry Road. The RCA that they're proposing with the streams and the water area, the storm control management ponds, and then open space down here, and the buffers that is 20%. Now in the PUD plan, if they mass grade, they have to do an additional 5%, but in the PUD plan, they're stating that they would just stay at 20%. Because 2 units per acre, you don't have to provide RCA. As I said, there's no historic structures, just the cemetery that's going to be preserved. The PUD does include a condition for 2 residential restricted affordable housing. The project is within the Cape Fear River Basin and Jordan Lake watershed, and it's in the primary watershed protection overlay district. So the project will comply with the structural stormwater controls and riparian stream buffer requirements, and provide additional water quality stormwater controls to reduce the overall nitrogen export. So the stormwater control devices that will be for the 24-hour, 1 year, 10-year, and 25-year storm events. And so you can see where the, let me get this, where the stormwater control would be located. The proposed PUD plan shall be designed to comply with the town's sewer and water master plan. Moving on to the transportation improvements, the project will be consistent with the transportation plan and UDO requirements. So they will be widening the Castleberry Road and the sidewalk. And I think if it's warranted by NCDOT, a right turning lane southbound on Wimberley Road onto Castleberry Road. The pedestrian, quickly, the entrance would be off of Castleberry Road, and then they would be connecting through, this is Castleberry Estates. So they would connect into this stub street and then onto Wimberley Road. There are shown stub streets off to the west and then down to the south. So they are proposing to upgrade the existing crossing of the American Tobacco Trail at Wimberley Road. That would be a high visibility crosswalk, markings and signs, and install a rapid flashing crosswalk beacon system. Additionally, they're going to extend the existing sidewalk along southwest side of Wimberley Road to connect to the American Tobacco Trail. But they will have to work that out with the town and NCDOT and also, I believe, Wake County ATT. And in the PUD, it says if there's no agreement that they would pay that fee in lieu. We did receive a letter from the Wake County School District, and they indicate that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. So school expansion or construction within the next 5 years, that may address the concerns. They were at the April 26th, 2023 Parks and Recreation meeting, and the commission made a recommendation for a fee in lieu. And they also went before the Environmental Advisory Commission, and they are stating on January 9th, 2023, and you can see also in your staff report, there were a couple of conditions that were not added to the PUD plan, and then they added these 10 conditions. The one condition that they had the greatest extent practicable include that 150 yard, or that's 450 foot safety buffer from the game land. So that did not get included. These are there are 10 conditions for architectural, and please note that the house pictures shown in the PUD plan, those are conceptual building elevations. With that, recommendation for denial of the rezoning Castleberry Reserve PUD. Based on this rezoning is not consistent with the current 2045 land use map. The rezoning is not consistent with the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission protected open space and the Town of Apex Environmental Advisory Board game land buffer recommendation. In addition, the rezoning is not consistent with the surrounding neighborhood character. So going through these reasons, it shows the 2045 land use map, and you can see that the residential density, rural density residential at 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. So the protected open spaces in this dark green, and then around this area, majority is rural density. And it's just stating that those are located primarily around the protected open space, consistent with the goals established in the Peak Plan 2030. So the protection of the environmental and natural resources warrants the location of the rural density residential classification adjacent to the protected open space. As stated in the Peak Plan 2030, Apex is located just east of one of the region's best natural amenities, Jordan Lake. The lake also serves as the area's main water supply. That's really important. As the town continues to grow, runoff from development will continue to be one of the biggest threats to water quality in the area. So the surrounding existing subdivisions in close proximity to the project site and the protected open space land, those to this project have lower densities than the Castleberry reserves. So staff recommends that the proposed project density be lower and a larger buffer adjacent to the protected open space be provided in order to be consistent with the surrounding existing neighborhood densities and consistent with the Peak Plan 2030 goal of protection of the environment and natural resources. And moving on to the protected open space game land buffer, that was number 2. The adjacent protected open space is also game land for public hunting, trapping, fishing, other wildlife associated recreation. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission recommends that local governments and developers do what is possible to maintain agricultural districts and natural areas within the buffer areas. So they're recommending, and also the town of Apex Environmental Advisory Board, to the greatest extent practicable, include a 150-yard or 450-foot North Carolina game land safety buffer along the exterior of the property adjacent to the U.S. Army Corps land. So in this site, you could see they are proposing this 237 to 349-foot buffer in this green area. But of course, these stormwater control ponds would be also into that buffer where they'd have to clear that area. And then the pink area shows, or the pink line shows that where that 450-foot buffer would be.
Should be, not would be.
Should be. Should be. And so in addition, the Peak Plan 2030 states the following regarding the game lands. Adjacent to Jordan Lake support plant and animal habitats and provide recreational and hunting opportunities. Encroaching development could negatively impact these resources by fragmenting wildlife corridors and contributing to non-point source pollution. So concerned about water quality. The protected open space is located in other areas of the town of Apex and ETJ. There are existing developments near the 2 other protected open space areas. So here we are in the northern area, and then we have these 2 dark protected open space. However, these 2 areas down here include railroad and the tobacco trail and roads that bisect through the open space area. So you can see, especially on this side, here's where the rail line is, and then it goes into the tobacco trail. And here's an additional road along here. However, what makes this northern protected open space area unique is it is the largest area of open space wildlife corridor. There is 2 miles between New Hill Road and Wimberley Road. In contrast, these have a smaller, shorter distance of about less than 1 mile. So this is showing 2 miles of clear wildlife corridor. So this has the largest non-fragmented wildlife corridor. So staff recommends the proposed project include the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Conservation and Town of Apex EAB recommended minimum 450-foot buffer along the protected open space game line. That's in order to provide safety buffer from the game land activities, and then the animal habitat protection, and certainly water quality. And so our final third one is the surrounding neighborhoods. So this is Lake Castleberry, which is under 1, and we looked at Castleberry Estates and Weddington up here. And looking at this table, which we compare the density, minimum lot size, setbacks, and the minimum distance to the protected open space and game land. So they show the 2 and then the 6,000 with the southern area, 10,000 minimum. The setbacks, and then looking at comparing, they are quite smaller than the other 3 subdivisions. And then, of course, the distance at 237 feet. However, the stormwater does cut into that 237 feet. So in comparison, the Castleberry Reserves has the highest density, the smallest lot size, the smallest rear, front, side, and corner yard setbacks, and the narrowest buffer area to the protected open space at 237 feet. As stated earlier, there are 2 sections, that 6,000 and then the 10,000. The house pictures that we're looking at with the conceptual, I wanted to say it was conceptual because those conceptual would not fit into the 6,000 square foot minimum lot. You're looking at a garage at about 20 feet wide, and so the house would be at 40 feet wide. Therefore, the proposed project is not consistent with the surrounding neighborhood character due to the high density, the smaller lot and setbacks, and then of course the shortest distance of the development area to the protected open space. In addition, the proposed PUD is providing 2 affordable units. However, it is not sufficient to meet the minimum of 5%, which would be 9 units. This came in January for review. However, our housing person was still meeting with the applicant, looking at the 5%. So that would be 9 units, and this proposed PUD is deficient by 7 units. So with that, the 2045 land use map designates the site as rural density residential classification. They're proposing the PUD with a maximum density of 2 units per acre, which is not valid density district within this classification. Therefore, the proposed project is not consistent with the 2045 land use map classification, the peak Plan 2030 goals into protection of environmental and natural resources, and the proposed rezoning is not reasonable and is not in the public interest because the proposed rezoning does not include the recommended North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission and EAB 450-foot safety buffer. Furthermore, the proposed rezoning is not reasonable and not in the public interest because the proposed rezoning is not consistent with the surrounding neighborhood character, is that it's a higher density, the smaller lot size, and smaller setbacks, and the nearest development, of course, to the open space. And with that, if you had any questions?
Thank you, June. Any questions for June?
Can you go back to the future land use map? What is the purple area along Highway 64 on the south side of the
This purple area?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's industrial.
industrial? What's the maximum impervious allowed under industrial?
The maximum
Impervious?
impervious. You know,
It's typically 70. That was a conditional zoning. We don't know offhand. If you need us to look it up, we can.
I don't think Adam would do.
I think it's contextually helpful to know, but if it takes.
We'll need a few minutes.
Yeah, don't worry about it. If this applicant or owner decided, if they decided to not, well, I guess the question I have, could you do a county zoning instead of going to a town of Apex zoning? Or because this is in the town of Apex's planning jurisdiction, they would have to rezone through the town? I guess, could you do a Wake County like well and septic subdivision, or do you have to go through the town?
You could do the, you could do the Wake County well and septic system.
And what density would they be?
They're at 80,
So like,
so, but I believe to do a septic and well, you're looking at maybe 3/4 of an acre per lot.
The minimum lot size in R80W is 80,000 square feet, which may or may not be enough to support a well and septic system depending upon the soils.
And wouldn't there still need to be town electricity, town utilities to some extent?
Not necessarily. If it's well and septic, they don't need the town water and sewer services. I don't know if Duke has lines out there or if they would need Apex Electric to serve. I don't know the closest electric utility provider.
Okay. I thank you for, I assumed that they would, so, yeah.
But assuming there's other homes in the area on that south side, you know, I'm assuming there must be Duke out there.
Okay.
And I don't know, they might do a community well, so
Okay.
probably 3/4 of an acre per lot.
It's almost 2 acres, because 43,560 is 1 acre. It's almost 2 acre lot size.
And it's your question, Brian?
yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Jim? Thank you, Jim. Would the applicant like to speak?
That'll work. Oh, that's okay. Wait, I got it. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Skinner and members of the board. Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street. Here tonight on behalf of the developer, and also with me are Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering, who you've heard from a few times, and Lyle Overcash with Kimley Horn, our traffic engineer. And so thanks to June for the presentation. As June mentioned, this is a PUD request. So to explain a little bit of how that came about, we started this process, I think in September of 2022, and we were considering whether to rezone to low density residential or to do a PUD. And the low density residential district offers density up to 3 units an acre. And so, you know, we thought we're proposing 2 units an acre, that may be the way to go. And in discussing it, where we arrived was that the PUD is really preferable here because it's a unique site, the nature of its adjacency to the Army Corps property and the open space, and some other kind of complicated things we wanted to do in the request that really fit better in a PUD. And so we've spent a lot of time working on really site-specific conditions here that have been carefully tailored to the site's location and to the environmental features. And so I think what you'll see through the presentation is that although we're proposing greater density than the land use map recommends, that we've reached the goal of the PUD process, which is to creatively plan for a site-specific, higher quality overall development than would otherwise occur in a base zoning district or in the county jurisdiction. And so with that context, I'll give you an overview of some of those specific conditions. As June mentioned, it's about 90 acres. It's an assemblage of the Markham family that's been in this area for many years. And we've obviously got Lake Castleberry to the north, Castleberry Estates to the east, and then the Army Corps property to the south. And to answer your question directly, Mr. Akers, we're actually in Wake County's jurisdiction and we're not in the ETJ. So as part of this application, we also have an annexation petition that'll be reviewed concurrently with this request. And so the current zoning is R80W, which requires minimum lot size of 80,000 square feet. And then we're requesting a rezoning to planned unit development. And as June mentioned, the land use map here is rural residential, which recommends very low density, single family development. And so, although what we're proposing is low density, we obviously acknowledge that we're asking for greater density than the land use map recommends. But we don't think that's the end of the discussion because, the project is reviewed for overall consistency with the peak plan. And so our goal in putting together this PUD package was to get to a place where even if we're inconsistent with the recommended density of the land use map, that we're overall consistent with the peak plan. And we think that's what we've done. But I think that's really your decision tonight is whether, the conditions are sufficient to say that we're overall consistent with the peak plan despite our inconsistency with the land use map. And so this is the current version of our concept plan. We went through several different iterations, and really what we focused on in this plan was being cognizant of the Army Corps land and the open space to the south. And so the first thing we did was think about how density could be laid out across the site. And so we purposely have transitioned the density down as it gets closer to the core property at the south. So you can see that the lighter color is lighter yellow color towards the top of the screen. There's smaller lot sizes there, closer to Castleberry Road. And then as you move south, the lot sizes increase in the Southern District. And so with some of these conditions, our goal was to really focus on addressing the environmental impact of the project, not just reducing density. Because, what we found, and I think the way a lot of planners and engineers think about it now is just reducing the density doesn't necessarily result in less of an environmental impact. We're asking for 2 units an acre. If we reduced our density to 1 unit an acre, we could bring a plan that graded just as much of the site as the 2 unit an acre plan. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about how could we address the environmental impacts other than just lowering the density. And another way that we did that is we've added a max built upon area requirement of 45%. And so the UDO requires a maximum of 70%. And so the goal there is to provide some peace of mind that even though the density is higher than the land use map, the actual impervious area will be lower than what's permitted under the UDO. And so then a couple other points we're preserving the cemetery in place that June mentioned in the brighter orange area towards the top of the screen. And that is a commitment of the case. So that'll be preserved with a fence that'll allow family members to come and visit. It'll be open. There'll be a gate, hopefully. So it should be a nice feature of the site there that'll stay in place. And then obviously at the south, I know there's a lot of conversation about this RCA at the south of the site. And so it does vary, I think, between, what were the numbers, 237 feet and around 350. And so, what we've done there is try to locate that at the south of the site, consistent with the recommendations of what's called the Green Growth Toolbox, which is a separate plan under the Wildlife Commission. And so that document, just to be clear, it's not a regulation, but it is a policy recommending document. And what it says specifically is that the goal of the policy is to limit interactions between homeowners and hunters along where there are residences adjacent to the core land. And so we've tried to do that here, and we don't think that that's going to be a concern for a few different reasons. So the buffer now is between 250 and 350 feet. Also in that area, from the southern property line north, the grade rises almost 60 feet. So if there are concerns about hunting bullets, stray bullets coming into the property, that grade change there will really act as kind of a backstop for hunting that takes place on the core property. So in contrast to where you've got a flat site or, you know, a big open field where, you know, a bullet could carry for a long way, hopefully the grade change there will help with that.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to stop you there and ask for clarification. Do you have some data on that? Do you have some? I hear that it's a potential, but I'm just wondering the standards around.
Yeah, we do have the topo
Oh, no, do you have the standards? What the standards would be?
for.
What typical? My understanding, I think, is that the standards that are currently set are set by the Wildlife Commission. I think I hear you asserting that the topography could potentially change
Right.
the instance. So I'm wondering what data you have to back that up.
Yeah, so the recommended policy is the 450-foot buffer.
Right.
And what it speaks to is reducing conflicts between hunters and residences. And so my point is that there are more ways to do that than just widening the buffer.
Okay, and I want
Right.
to understand, is that your point, or is that a industry standard point?
Well, again, I don't think there's not an industry standard here for the buffer because it's just it's a policy recommendation. I mean, there are other sites in Apex that I'll pull up in a moment where there's a 50-foot buffer adjacent to the core game land.
Okay.
And so there's not if there were a standard, I think we would be following that, but it's the recommendation of this separate policy. And so what we did was try to meet that, you know, to the greatest extent possible, and then explain why we think, you know, the full 450 feet is not necessary, that there won't be conflicts here with hunters and residences.
Okay. I appreciate any additional
Yeah.
information.
No
on that.
problem.
Continue. Thank you.
Yep. And so, you know, we did look into the specific game land regulations applicable to the Jordan Lake property, because they do differ in some ways. And there is an actual regulation that prohibits firing a gun within 450 feet of residences. So that's a requirement now to all hunting at Jordan Lake. And it's also a requirement at Jordan Lake specifically that hunters can't carry a loaded gun. So they're supposed to, you know, when they get to their location, then load the gun and then hunt. They can't just walk through the woods with a loaded gun. So there are some specific regulations there that, you know, actually apply to Jordan Lake and Falls Lake. And, you know, I assume it's because those are lakes that have, you know, more pedestrians around them than some of the other rural areas in the state. So altogether, the point is that we don't think there's a safety issue here for the buffer at the south side of the property. Let's see. And then a big part of this too, something we've spent a lot of time working on is the American Tobacco Trail connection. So this will be an off-site sidewalk improvement that we're doing that's a condition of our case, and it will connect the existing sidewalk on Wimberley Road to the American Tobacco Trail. So you can see in white there the sidewalk that's left by the Wimberley Oaks project. I'm sorry, the Wimberley Estates project. And so we'll be picking that up and carrying it south along the yellow dotted line to connect to the tobacco trail that's shown in green. And so right now, actually, you know, some of the neighborhoods around here are walking across a footpath here to get to the tobacco trail. So we think this will be a big, you know, a big help in terms of pedestrian connectivity, and it'll allow a lot of people to get to the tobacco trail safely. In the circled area there will be a signalized stop with a safe pedestrian crossing. So, and it does require coordination with the Army Corps, because the Army Corps property is right here to the west. The Wake County, the NCDOT, and the Town of Apex transportation staff. So we've reached out to all those different departments, and we've started discussions now to feel comfortable that we can make the commitment. So it's going to require more engineering at site plan, but we've gotten comfortable enough in those conversations that we felt comfortable adding it as a condition. And then the affordable housing commitment, I wanted to provide some details on that because it's really, really math heavy to understand, you know, why we made the commitment we did and why we can't make a greater commitment. And so what we've committed to is 2 for sale affordable units at 135% AMI for an affordability period of 30 years. And so The way that we got there, and I contrast this with affordable rental units, which are really easy to calculate. It's just a monthly rent maximum that you can charge for residents with incomes within an AMI threshold. And so with the for sale product, which is going to be at this site, it's much harder because you have to kind of back into the for sale price. And so you take a yearly income that someone has within the AMI, so here it's 135%, and then they can't spend more than 30% of their gross monthly income on housing. And so that's their max mortgage payment with interest, with utilities, property taxes, and everything else that's escrowed. And so what you see here is when we did this calculation for a couple other cases last year, when interest rates were so low, the max for sale affordable price at 100% AMI was $413,000. And so now, because interest rates have risen so drastically since then, the 135% AMI price is now $418,000 because rates have gone from about 3.5% to 7.2%. And so that's the rationale behind the 135%. And then in terms of the number of units, it's so early, it'll be several years before these are constructed and sold. So we don't have for sale prices now at market rate. But I know in Apex now, there are, single family homes in that area are going for $700,000-800,000 to all the way up to $1.5 million. And so you can see how big of a hit that is for each affordable unit. It's several $100,000 at a minimum. And so in contrast to a rental project where you say we can do 5% because those monthly rents, we know they will work. When you get to 9 for sale units, you're talking about, a commitment of $3-4 million. And so that's the rationale between the two units. We did want to do something here because I know the town has had a big push for affordable housing and has had a lot of success. And so we did want to offer a commitment there. And then, as I mentioned, we took a look at some of the other subdivisions in the town that are adjacent to the core property. And so you can see here, this is the Willow Hill subdivision along Olive Chapel. And so you can just see how close some of these lots are to the Army Corps property. And so they have a kind of a variable width buffer there, but it's well under 50 feet in a lot of places. And then, just kind of comparing also what they did for the built upon area, they had a max built upon area of 50%. And then similarly, the Saddlebrook subdivision, which is also on Olive Chapel, that was approved in 2015, it had a max built upon area of 70%. And again, you can see how close some of the lots are here in the subdivision to the Army Corps property. And so our max built upon area and our RCA commitment along the core property is much greater than both of those projects. And then I didn't have time to add this one to the slides, but also the Koch project on US 64. We looked at that site plan today because they also are adjacent to the core property. And I think they have a 50-foot buffer, 50-foot type B, maybe buffer.
That's not residential, that's commercial.
It's not, right, it's industrial.
Apples comparison.
Yeah, no, it's certainly different, and you want a larger buffer for residential.
And what were those dates again, the Saddlebrook and then the previous?
Yep.
2015, 2018.
Right, and they are older cases.
So, that doesn't fall in the same 2045 land use map. I mean,
Right.
2018 and 20, those were part of the 2030.
Right.
So, still, again, not apples to apples.
Yeah, no, it's not, and there's no perfect comparison. We were just trying to understand what's been done over the last 10 years or so adjacent to the Army Corps property, because there's only so much, so many sites adjacent, and so there haven't been many that have come in the last 2 or 3 years. So, and then we did some analysis of some of the recent for sale prices in these adjacent neighborhoods, and you can see here that the Castleberry Estates neighborhood, which is about a unit an acre, has an average sales price of over $1.3 million. And similarly, the Estates at Weddington, which is just north of the site, also has an overall density of 1.48 units an acre, And those houses are also going well over $1.2 million. And so the purpose of showing these and doing these calculations was to try to understand somewhat how density can affect for sale prices. And although we're not, it's not definition of affordable housing, we are trying to maintain, some level of lower pricing with the 2 units an acre, as opposed to just lowering it to 1 unit an acre and then all the homes are $1.5 million. And so that's just something that we've tried to consider in kind of attacking the PUD and adding our conditions. And then I know that part of the reason that staff recommends denial is inconsistency with the character of the surrounding community. And I think we have to be a little careful, using that language, because it can mean a lot of different things to different people. And so I think here where we kind of differ with staff is it's not necessarily inconsistent just because it's higher density. And so a lot of these elevations, while they are conceptual, they're in the PUD. And so we are bound by them in terms of some of the architecture. They're actually taken from some of the surrounding neighborhoods. And so the intent is to build something that it is literally, similar in character to some of the subdivisions that are out there now. And so that's what we were trying to convey with these elevations. And then going back to, just to kind of wrap everything up, our overall goal was to add conditions that are consistent with the peak plan, in spite of our inconsistency with the land use map. And so on the left, you've got different peak plan policies, and then on the right, you've got commitments of the case that go to those specific policies. And so obviously a big part of the peak plan is protection of environmental and natural resources. And so we've addressed that through the RCA, the stormwater quality. We have a condition that will remove nitrogen rather than just treating the size of, enlarging the size of the stormwater pond. So that's above the UDO requirement. We have made a commitment that 5 homes will be pre-configured with solar. So not just conduit, but they'll have actual solar systems. We've got the max built upon area of 45%, the overall density cap, and then the phasing of density we've tried to implement across the site. Also, one of the policies is a variety of housing types available to a range of incomes. We've got 2 affordable housing units, and then just generally additional homes to add to the housing supply. And then in terms of connectivity, we've got the Tobacco Trail connection. We will be putting in sidewalks along Castleberry Road. For whatever reason, there aren't sidewalks on the north side adjacent to Lake Castleberry. And so that'll be a new pedestrian connection that's not there now. And then finally, the preservation of the historic cemetery, which is also a goal of the peak plan. And so with all those different commitments, we feel like we've made a good case that we're consistent overall with the peak plan, and we respectfully ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we have the public hearing section.
Could I ask a question? I'm one of the landowners. I just want clear we have contracts signed with them. My great-great-great-grandfather bought that, or got that in a homestead land from the government in 1790. And this is not my forte, so I'm just trying to make sure that it's understood, because sort of the reason it's being sold is because of the tax burden, and we can't pass it to our children and keep it in forestry because none of them will have 20 acres. This is contingent on their purchase of the property. Is that correct? I don't want to get caught up in them come by in 6 months and say we're not going to buy the property and it's been rezoned. Is that an issue that needs to be addressed? I'm just saying this would not go into effect until they purchase the property. Is that correct?
It depends on how your contract's set up.
We can talk about that afterwards. I can help.
If you want to speak, can you sign in and state your name for the record?
They're not familiar with your contract.
I'm saying, but do you say that the contract this is contingent? I mean, I would hate for it to be rezoned and then all of a sudden they back out and we have a new tax burden that is the reason we're selling it to begin with. Is that your understanding?
That's not.
So no, the zoning isn't contingent on us, the developer buying it. but that, I think under the contract, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think the rezoning is the biggest thing that needs to happen before closing. So then, right after that, I think the closing is.
Well, that was not my understanding. See, that's the conflict that I have, that I need to go home and share with the rest of the family, because my understanding is that, I mean, if they rezone this property and then back out of it, where am I at? I'm left with land that is zoned, is gonna put me under tax burdens that are just tremendous.
Sir, I
Let's
definitely.
talk about it afterwards. I can clear
Well,
it up.
I wanna make sure they're on board too. That's the issue. You're with the side that can back
No, I know,
out
but
of it.
I
You
don't
still
think
have that right.
They don't have what they need to answer your questions. So.
But sir, I would like to answer part of your question. We're also gonna ask you that you sign in so we have on
State your name for the
record.
record.
So we definitely cannot answer the legal portion, and encourage you to have that conversation with him. And hope that you have some clarity on that. As far as this process, I hope that there has been honest conversations about the process as this comes before the town. The application comes before planning staff. The planning staff makes their recommendations, which they have done. They've presented it, June has presented it to us with their concerns, and then any concerns that they have, and then their recommendations. We will consider that and have conversation around that. That's what you'll hear next. We'll have conversations around that. And then we will vote on a recommendation to then send to the town council. It must pass here with either approval or disapproval, and then the town council will take that into consideration. Understand that they take the staff's consideration, they take citizens' input, and they take this advisory board's consideration. So this is a long way away from being done. And it sounds at the moment, without having further discussion, that there have been some hurdles with staff. And so I think I wanted you just to understand from the town perspective, what steps are next, once we close down tonight.
Once this is decided, it goes to what group then?
It will go to the town council,
Town council.
and Diane can share the date. I think I heard it was in August.
And there will be an opportunity to address that at that point.
Yes, sir. And I think before that meeting, and we can let you know when that meeting, when it will become before town council, you'll want to have your legal questions answered before you come to that meeting. You're very welcome. Do we know, Diane?
Yes, the meeting is Tuesday, August 8th at 6 p.m.
Tuesday, August 8th.
And sir, if you missed the beginning, we definitely encourage you to make any comments, any concerns, any questions that you have that you want on the record, that you would like this body to consider, and have that as part of public record.
The secretary,
Can you step up to the mic, sir?
I'm sorry,
Step to the mic, please.
the graveyard.
State your name. State your name for the record.
My main concern was the graveyard, and
Name, sir?
I think they're addressing that by
Sir, your
putting a
name,
fence.
please?
Steve Ammons.
Steve Evans, thank you
I'm-
for checking in. Thank you.
Thank you. The graveyard situation was one that the family was concerned about, but they've agreed to put a fence around that, and I think that helps protect it. My great-great-great-grandfather is buried in that graveyard. And so it's terrible for us to have to go, but there's just, it's not like it was 50 or 100 or 200 years ago. We've been there for 230, 40 years, I guess. I just want to make sure that if it's zoned that way, that we're not, if they were to decide that for some reason that they didn't want to, because it's been extended now for another 6 months recently on their payment to us. So my concern now is if they get it rezoned, are we going, and then they do decide not to buy it, or are we going to be stuck with $100,000 a year tax burden?
Right.
I don't think it's something that this board can answer.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Your name again was Steve Ammond, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We have anyone who wants to speak during the public comment other than Mr. Ammond? All right. I'm going to close the public comment section and bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion.
I have a few questions. I live off Castleberry Road, so I have a particular keen interest on how this one progresses. The question for you, Mr. Ammons.
I'm
So,
sorry.
so you, I'm up here, look, oop, here, hey.
You stay there.
I'm sorry.
So I live off Sleepy Valley at the end of the road.
Yeah, I know exactly where it's at.
So is it true that you and your family were the reason why the town of Apex and the town of Cary weren't able to put the sewer treatment plant where there's currently a water treatment plant? Going back using the civil and I guess it would be Revolutionary War, the cemetery was grounds for the heritage so that they didn't put a sewer plant like next to our neighborhood.
Right, right. Well, I have to give you a little bit of a story. I'll be as quick as I can. My part of the family moved to Sanford, and my wife's husband worked for me as Research Triangle Institute. I was a contractor with them for 28 years, and he suddenly died of leukemia. And her being like a third cousin, we were taking care of the kids so much, we got married. So about that 10-year period, I've only been on the farm, back on that farm, except as a kid coming for family reunions. I've only been back on the farm about 10 years. How long ago was that?
Back in, I think, the late 80s, early 90s.
See, I wouldn't have been there. I'm sure that they opposed it because it was a family farm that had been there for so long. I can only imagine that they would oppose it, you know. I was not on the property. I've only been back on the property about 10 years.
Gotcha.
So I don't know what all happened in that time frame. I know that they certainly would have opposed it. You know, a landfill being there right on the farm that you've had for 230 years. But I was not on the farm at that time, and I don't know what actions were taken at that time.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? No.
Any other comments or possible?
Oh yeah, I have many questions. So my neighbors, Sleepy Valley folks live in the county. Not for you, sir. This is probably more for the applicant. Their two big concerns: traffic, and I'll echo that. Not volume of traffic, but the speed. Lake Castle or Castleberry Road currently doesn't have signage, and so I guess because it's not posted, de facto NCDOT goes to 55 miles an hour, and they use every bit of it, sometimes more. It's really unsafe. We used to walk that road twice a day. I taught my kids how to ride the bike on that road. Speed reduction would be pretty keen for all the neighbors, and I think even the Lake Castleberry. We're fortunate to have somebody else that lives in Lake Castleberry on the board tonight too. Speed on Castleberry Road is a big concern.
Mr. Akers, I'm happy to report to you that I made contact with DOT earlier this afternoon. Two things to fill you in on. Wimberley and Castleberry are both on NCDOT's repaving. We're supposed to let the contract at the end of this year for a 2025 repaving of both roads. The second thing is they have passed our request along for speed reduction. Wimberley Road is currently 45 miles an hour. Castleberry is 55. We have asked them to evaluate a reduction back to 45 as we talked about. So yeah, I'm just waiting. DOT, of course, has to go through their evaluation, but we've already
While
started.
you're standing there talking about Castleberry Road, Ms. Cowell's presentation, I want to believe she said that the cross section is to add more pavement and curb and gutter. And I'll tell you that most of the people that live on that road love the rural character of the road. There's a vineyard. It's very heavily used by a lot of Apexians. And the Lake Castleberry subdivision has a beautiful landscape buffer with no sidewalk, and it's a ribbon pavement. It's got a very aesthetic appeal. It's a rural character. There's a lot of farms still on the road. I don't think curb and gutter is something I would support. being a resident that lives out there.
Mr. Akers, I completely agree with you, but I am going to probably defer to Mr. Dalton or June we have been required, I think per the plan, to follow the town's transportation plan, which requires curb and gutter, half of a 2-lane section or whatever it is, Russell, I don't know exactly what it is, but it is a curb and gutter section. So if that becomes a condition from the planning board, we're okay either way.
Could they do a fee in lieu for that?
Yeah, I'm not seeing zoning conditions specific to that. The UDO typical requirements are curb and gutter and sidewalk along frontage, unless it's a very low density product as defined under the UDO, which my understanding of this is it's not considered very low density based on the zoning that's proposed. We typically don't recommend taking a fee in lieu in the case like this for curb and gutter. We'd want it constructed because I don't know if the town would ever go back in and construct it. I don't like taking fees and lieux for things we never intend to build. Sure. And we're just holding money for.
How did Lake Castleberry across the street get away with not building it?
I think it's a good question. I have to go back and look at the history on that to see if something different was recommended. Okay. It was one of the early developments out here. Yeah. So I'm not sure if they did pay a fee in lieu. In the past, the town did routinely collect more fee in lieu payments from developers for things like curb and gutter and sidewalk in rural areas where we didn't have a lot of development. We've since changed the way we view a lot of that, because as development has started to occur around Apex, as soon as development occurs, people start coming to us and asking, why were these improvements not done? You know, I've moved out to this rural area, but my neighborhood's not rural. Why don't I have sidewalks? Why is there not curb and gutter and things like that? So we tend to recommend those rather than collect fee in lieu. I would say that if they want a specific type of section out there that's more like a rural section, that maybe they include a zoning condition specific to that town council could consider. It's a little bit strange, but I mean, I think that gives staff the ability to say that, yes, this is what was recommended by
setting a slippery slope.
In this case, I think it's a PUD, so they would have to make a case for why they want that specific zoning condition. If it's a rural character, it's a road that's not classified on the transportation plan, it's not technically a thoroughfare designation. I mean, those are some of the reasons they could use. So, yeah, it comes down to expectations. I mean, the town does not intend to take over this road at any point in the future. We intend for it to remain a DOT road, so we're less concerned about the curb and gutter here, but it is a typical UDO requirement for curb and gutter if it's not very low density.
So Russell, is it not true that this road is not planned to go further to the west in the future, or are our maps not showing that correctly?
I'm not aware of what future connection would be out there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was similar to Horton Road that we looked at. Those are the two that were just stopping right there at the Chatham County line.
I mean, we have in some past cases where, say if it's not ultimate section or if it's a rural section, we've accepted a additional shoulder widening in lieu of curb to provide for a little bit of additional safety along the roadway, so it's not quite as narrow. So that could be an option as well. You know, we just typically don't like to collect fees and lieux for things like curb and gutter on a state road if it's not going to be done in the future.
So we've just confirmed that this road dead ends on the property that's the Lake Castleberry HOA land, and then further west is Army Corps. So this road's never going anywhere. So I would be in support of a zoning condition to not require it. It makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can I? In one of the slides, the proposed slides, it showed the northern site area versus the southern site area, and the northern would be 2 units per acre, And then the southern, it just mentioned low density. Can you please clarify or elaborate on the low density?
Yeah, so the entire site will be 2 units an acre maximum. And so in the southern section, the minimum lot sizes are larger. So because of that, there will be lower density there. It'll probably be under 2 units an acre. And then in the lighter yellow color, it might be, 2.03 or something, something slightly higher, because but the overall site will be no more than 2 units an acre.
And the 2 units per acre are from the gross acreage. So
Right.
everything, 89 acres. So that also counts roads, and that's why when you say 2 units per acre, a lot of people think, oh, these are going to be half-acre lots. But once you start figuring everything, so the top part was at 6,000 square foot minimum, and then the brighter yellow was the 10,000 square foot.
Because if I look at Lake Castleberry, I live at Lake Castleberry community, and it's roughly 119 acres with 147 homes. And when I compare the numbers, it's a higher density.
Yeah.
Right on the water.
Mm-hmm.
The buffer is, zip. I mean,
So
it's still under construction. Am I, or is it not? You guys do.
no, it was turned over last year. And I'm looking at Weddington and especially the estates, which is 1 unit.
Right. Yeah, and we know it's definitely higher. It's more so just, I guess the question that we've been trying to tackle is, does lowering the density help with anything, including the environmental impact?
Does it help with traffic? Like Mr. Ryan Akers mentioned, Castleberry Road, it's just somebody, there was like 2 accidents, the past year on it, and it's just busy already. So yeah, I'm just a little concerned about the density.
Yeah, and I'll chime in with, I live and die by the 2045 land use map.
Yes.
And I'm always going to come with, my question will always be, what are the benefits to the community if it outseeds if we're falling outside the 2045 land use map? And Mr. Carpenter, I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed that your approach was to talk about how that this community reaches the goal of what Apex sees, because it doesn't, right? It clearly doesn't, and the staff has outlined that it doesn't. And it feels disingenuous to say that it reaches the goal. So that's point number 1. And again, I'm always going to come back to 2045 land use map. And if there are benefits outside of the map, that's a whole. Excuse me, I'm not done. There's when we come outside the map, there's going to be a whole nother discussion. But whether it's traffic, whether it's environment, there's a list of concerns that staff has laid out. So that was one goal. I also, as the daughter of a hunter, I'm also concerned at the frivolousness in which you threw out stray bullets, topography. If you're gonna come with that, and I agree that there might be there may be some topography benefits, I'm gonna want the data. You can't just come with figures and off the top of your head of what you believe. I'm going to need the data. I understand that it's in the PUD. It's in the PUD for a reason.
Yeah. Can we follow up with some of that?
Just 1 second.
Yeah, no.
And then just 1 second, and I'll let you, I absolutely want your responses. But once you kind of throw something out like that, and I've spoken with you about this when you have come before, when you come with data and figures, please come with the information to back that up. So when you go before town council, please include that. As you showed us with the 2015 and 2018 subdivisions that you're trying to make comparisons with, you can bring the comparisons, but if you're talking 2015 and 2018, we are almost a decade away from that with a different council and a different planning board and a different map. And so things are different. And so yes, it's going to look different, and it should look different because the community has said that this is what they want it to look like, which again goes back to the goal. Lastly, Mr. Ammons, I really appreciate you being here. And I'm really saddened at what apparent, at least in this moment, lack of communication and transparency with the family on what the process is, and the expectation that should have been set about what the realities of what this proposal looks like. Coming before this board with a staff denial does not mean that it's not going to be approved, but it has an uphill battle. And so I would have hoped that you would have had those conversations with the staff. I absolutely look forward to your responses.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I'll just take them piece by piece. So I don't feel that I was disingenuous in the policy analysis. I was very honest that I thought that we're over the density that's recommended. And I was trying to highlight the benefits of the project, to which there are benefits. I think the connection is important, and the other benefits I outlined. So I do think those are real. Now, the question I posed earlier for the board was, do you think that those benefits outweigh the density? And it sounds like the answer for you is no, which I think that's the policy analysis we're supposed to be doing. And so the intent wasn't to be disingenuous, but to call out policies that are in the peak plan. So, and then to the data on the hunting, we can happily, provide the topo. I think maybe it would have helped to have that on a slide to help explain the change there. And then in terms of Mr. Ammons, just explaining how the process kind of works. I haven't dealt directly with the sellers at all. It's generally the real estate brokers that correspond with them and advise them on. So it would be wrong for me to give Mr. Ammons advice on his situation since I don't represent him. But with that being said, you're right. There's obviously been a miscommunication. So I'm going to speak to him right after this and see if we can't clear things up and at least get him talking with his broker about what's going on and how he's affected. There are several different family sellers. And so, typically if we get a question from the seller or the developer gives us a question from the seller, we respond immediately. So I hadn't gotten any of those from any of the sellers. And so I was just as surprised as you all. And so we'll certainly follow up with him. And so, that's really, I think that's it point by point. But, my point was not to be disingenuous. And, I think I laid out reasons why we believe it's consistent with the plan. And obviously staff disagrees. We've talked to them at length about that. And we have made significant changes to the plans in the staff review process. So, it's not like we got here and, June presented and said, she's not in favor of this. And then it was the first time we discussed it. We've been talking for months and you've seen enough of these projects that sometimes there are things that a developer can and can't give on. And I'm bound by that, just like staff is bound by their land use map. So,
appreciate your following up with Mr. Ammons and understand the situation you're in. So thank you for that. And as you go before the town council, appreciate you bringing the topo. I think having not just the topo, but some data on what standards are. I'm originally from Fort Bragg, so I know I have some idea of what some of those standards are and distances, and so I know they exist. I don't know what they are. My dad could tell you, but I know they exist. So I think if you find out those standards, I think you will have a stronger case.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
All right, bringing it back to the board for a motion or possible motion.
I guess I'll go first. This is a really difficult project because it does set a precedent to Ms. Sherman's point. You're taking something of very low density and pulling it out of that and making it, low density. So what does the town get back for that? I'm going to go personally and then, at the town level, and keep in mind, I'm a county resident and I back up to the core land. My house is 200 feet from the buffer. My neighbor is 125. I don't have personally the concern about the stray bullets because I know people out there hunting have hunter safety training. So bullets aside, I don't care. I'm more into it. What do we as town and county citizens get out of this. And that connection to the American Tobacco Trail single-handedly would sway my vote in favor to keep me off Wimberley Road when I run down to connect there. It is a very dangerous road. People don't drive 45, I think Mr. Roach said it's posted. You can get 80 miles an hour down that road with the potholes. It's crazy, and people take advantage of it. To have a pedestrian connection, that would sway my vote alone. But if we can add a modifier to the zoning condition to keep Castleberry rural, there are businesses that are on that road, significant businesses that rely on that rural nature, particularly the vineyard, the Kluwer Vineyard. That's an asset to our town. It's the only one I believe we have. To the point of the Markham family, I asked that question because I kind of knew the answer. They really did a solid for the town. I mean, entire western Apex is opened up through that gravity sewer and the pump or the force main that opens up down to the New Hill plant because they weren't able to be located off Wimberley Road. Thank God they didn't, because I don't want that smell in my backyard. That's a NIMBYism. That's the only NIMBYism you're going to hear out of me. Taking it up to the town level, the density doesn't scare me. I'm a big Chuck Moreau and Strong Towns fan. I think the more density is more valuable for our tax base and per capita. The more houses in a clustered unit is less maintenance costs and less taxes overall. So I don't mind that density as long as it's not the whole site is dense. And I think they kind of alluded to clustering in not so many words. But I don't love it. But I really like that Tobacco Trail connection personally. And I do like that Castleberry Road Preserve Rural and having interconnectivity through Lake Castleberry, the point at Lake Castleberry, and ultimately through that Greenway and the Greenway Amendment we did a few months ago. I would be in favor of it. I'm sure others might not feel that way. I know certain neighbors of mine definitely won't.
And to piggyback on Ryan, as a neighbor and on the board, there are pros and cons, which Ryan also listed. I just want to mention the open games land area, the wildlife open area is very active. It's heavily used. We see trucks all the time there. And to see it, I mean, I'm not a hunter, I'm a city dweller, so but that's part of culture here, so I want to respect that, and to take a piece of that away, I think, I'm not sure if that is doing this county a favor.
So hearing all this, how do we come with a motion to approve or to deny? Case in front of us.
With Mr. Ryan, it's gonna be real hard to zone around hunters' bullets. That's the hunter's responsibility. I think the benefits outweigh there are pros and cons, and 400, and I'm just curious, and maybe I haven't heard of it. Have we ever had a 450-foot buffer? And we may have. I just don't remember anything remotely close to that. Do the staff know if we've ever had anything before that big?
There are very wide areas that are in floodplain, but I don't know how wide they are. But I would guess there probably are some that are that wide, but they're floodplains, not called buffers.
Okay. That's an interesting point too about the floodplain. This site does abut the core land, which is floodplain. That's why it is core land, because it's the lake bounce for when it floods. The stormwater, that reminds me, we sat up here as a board and unanimously approved the Coke plant, which I can see across the lake or from the White Oak Creek impoundment from my house. It's like 50 feet of open commercial land. And so we're sitting here discussing like, oh, well, you know, we don't want the residential density, but we're just going to blitz that entire Coke plant for an industrial user that didn't have the stormwater controls until we really hounded them on the phase 2. Because I remember they kind of proffered up some better environmental. They're coming out of the gate with the nutrient removal, which I know the Jordan Lake watershed regulations are very low target nutrient because that lake's in a bad way. So I'm encouraged by that.
Do we know what the buffer was on the commercial park across 751 from the Coca-Cola plant? It also buffered the same
I remember talking about it. I don't
Yeah, I
remember
just
what
don't
it
know. I
was.
think
remember
it was
being
50
big.
foot. I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
I don't recall it being very big.
Around 50 feet.
Yeah,
Although not residential, I agree.
correct.
But to Ryan's point, this is 2 units an acre. It's not. It's still low density.
2 units an acre, yes. So, all that being said, do we have a motion to approve or deny?
I would like to make a motion, but I do want to see that condition added of the cross section of Castleberry Road foreshore. And you said the speed reduction is already in play. There's nothing we can zone against that because it's a DOT road and it's subject to their, but it's encouraging.
So how do we want to put this to the, if we're proposing a approval, which is going against staff, are we saying, yes, we want to do this and with what conditions? So that council has something to work with.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to offer to Mr. Akers that we will work with staff to come up with a condition. We will send it through staff and they can forward it to you guys for the rural context of Castleberry Road to work with Russell and June to work some language out. Just to get on record that we are okay with that.
Thank you. So Ryan, is your motion including rural context roads?
Section to be worked out with staff before council.
Okay, so how do we put this into a cohesive motion?
As we're putting it together, I just really want to name this incredibly, I mean, you already know which way I'm voting, but this incredibly slippery slope that we're going down. I just want to name it. I see we're going down it. You know, I live and by the land use map. We are arbitrarily going against it. We are going to add some character decisions that not every new development has the benefit of having staff sitting or board representation to ask for such things as road changes. I just want to name that very slippery slope we're going down. And what does that look like for the next development that's coming before us? You all know how I'm going to vote. That's not going to change. But I just want to name that and put that out there. Continue.
I'll make a motion to approve case 23 CZ04 Castleberry Preserve as presented in the staff report favorably with the condition that Castleberry Road cross-section maintain a rural nature and a condition to be worked out with staff.
So we have a motion, do we have a second? Second. Keith, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any dissents?
Yes.
Yes.
Dissent.
So we have 3 dissents and 4. You're a 4.
So there should be 8 votes.
Yeah, there should be.
There should be 8 votes, so I'm not sure if we need to do hands because I don't know who voted for and against.
Dissent.
Dissent.
So it's 5-3.
5-3.
So 5-3, excuse me. My math's a little wobbly. So that passes. Is that correct, Diane? That passes.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So 23 CZ04 passes and a 5-3 vote. All right, June, item number 4, public hearing and possible motion on case 23 CZ10 Salem Church Road parcels.
Okay, this rezone is in the northeast corner, or northeast section of the town. And it's located in the northeast corner of Salem Church Road and Tahoe Glen Place. So these are 3 parcels totaling 2.9 acres. And the zoning district, current zoning district is residential agricultural. And right along here is the purple line, which showing along the northern section is the Apex Carry agreement line. So real quick, back up. The subdivision is in the town of Cary and is West High subdivision. To the west is the Glen at West High. To the east is actually, go back down south, is Salem Point Townhomes. And this is a single family home on these on this parcel, and it is actually part of the Salem Point planned unit development. So you can see these were both rezoned together. So the proposed zoning district is medium density conditional zoning. And the 2045 land use map shows medium density residential. So the three parcels include existing single family homes with accessory buildings and some mature trees. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on April 24th, 2023, and the meeting report is attached to the staff report. We received a letter from Wake County Public School System, and they indicate that all grade levels are anticipated to have sufficient capacity. The proposed conditions include the use single-family accessory apartment, and they went to the Environmental Advisory Board on March 16, 2023, and those conditions are included with the conditional zoning, and those are conditions 1 through 6. Condition number 7 states that existing parcels are served by 4 driveways, and the subdivisions of the parcels shall not increase the total number of existing driveways, so they're stay at 4 driveways. Conditions 8 through 15 are the architectural conditions. We were notified about a storm water issue on the property to the east, contacted Public Works, and they stated that stormwater will be attenuated to pre-development conditions for the 1 and 10-year storm. Basically, it's meaning it should not make the situation worse. It does, the grade goes down to this parcel. So, in showing Salem Church Road is designated as a 2-lane thoroughfare road, 60-foot right-of-way with bike lanes, curb gutter, and sidewalks. The project frontage is 458 feet. So you can see just outlined in here. The existing conditions do not include a curb, gutter, and sidewalk. So the table shows you west of the project site. You can see where the sidewalk makes that turn, and about 400 feet from the project site, here's the other sidewalk. Curb and gutter make their way around this and then stop to the south. They have curb and gutter, and the sidewalk stops along there as well. I checked in with Public Works. They did receive a fee in lieu for sidewalk for the Salem Point PUD on this side, and also for this property to the north, which was part of the PUD. So we do have a fee in lieu. That was in 2015.
If you got a, sorry to break stride, but if you got a fee in lieu for that, could improvements along this frontage and it be combined with that fee in lieu to make the full connection to the Glen at West High?
Along here?
Yeah.
In talking with Russell, do you know, as far as this property is owned by Mr. and Mrs. King, I believe, but in talking with Public Works, I think they would have to go through, some legal as far as discussions with the property owner?
Yeah, if we don't have enough easement and or right of way, we would need to approach those property owners. So the answer is yes, we could certainly apply a fee in lieu toward a sidewalk extension, but that project would have to investigate what easements and right of way we'd need to acquire as part of that.
Wait, so I want to make sure I'm understanding what Mr. Akers is asking. What I think he's asking is, we got fee in lieu for that property in a previous agreement. So those funds should be available to build the sidewalk and make everything contiguous.
So fee in lieu is based on an estimate at the time.
Right.
So it may not completely cover the construction cost, depending on what it looks like. In addition, and also if development did not occur on that portion, even though they paid the fee in lieu and it was rezoned, we still would not have the right of way and easements, and they would not have necessarily paid a fee in lieu for the cost of that acquisition that we would have to incur. So the expectation is the town would be out some amount of money that's not covered. We just don't know how much that would be.
Right.
And we don't know if those owners would be amenable to the acquisition of easements and or right of way. That would be a negotiation process.
Is it a different property owner than, I thought it was combined with the Salem Point to the south. Is it different?
Looking back into Salem Point, this was rezoned and then they came back in, I think a couple of years later, and brought this into the PUD. So it's owned by somebody else, but they went ahead and zoned it, right?
If it's zoned, does it require that you dedicate the right of way along your frontage to the ultimate section?
It's not until development occurs. So we would anticipate since it was rezoned, I would anticipate that they do have a plan for some point in the future. It could just be because the existing owners wanted to live in the house for a certain amount of time before they develop, but I would expect they didn't rezone it, thinking they weren't going to develop at some point in the near future. And at that point, they would have to construct their improvements along the frontage, so it wouldn't be on the town to have to acquire the property. They, at that time, could then get reimbursement of that fee in lieu when they do that construction with their development.
Thank you.
Yeah, I asked the same question about, and Jean said it's not that simple, So in order to provide that continuous infrastructure consistent with the Apex Transportation Plan along Salem Church Road, staff recommends the applicant add that condition to install the sidewalk, curb, and gutter as follows. The developer shall provide roadway frontage improvements along Salem Church Road consistent with the 35-foot back-to-back typical section with 5-foot sidewalk on a 60-foot right-of-way. At this time, the applicant has not agreed to the addition of this condition. The affordable housing is not applicable to this small project. And the applicant will be paying a fee in lieu for park and rec fees. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning to 3CZ10 Salem Church Road with the conditions as offered by the applicant. If the following condition is added, that the developer shall provide the roadway frontage improvements along Salem Church Road, consistent with that 35-foot back-to-back with the 5-foot sidewalk on the 60-foot right-of-way. And the 2045 land use map classifies the subject property as medium density residential. The proposed rezoning is medium density residential conditional zoning, and it's consistent with the land use classification. With the additional condition recommended by staff, the proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will implement stricter environmental conditions than the UDO requires and provide additional single-family homes that are compatible with those in the general vicinity.
June, I want to make sure I heard you right. You're saying that curb and gutter and sidewalk would be included in that project. Okay.
Yeah, that's our recommended condition to add.
Okay. Thank you.
With that, you got any questions from the applicant?
The applicant care to speak?
Good evening now.
Hey.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board here. Peter Knosson, Jones Knosson Engineering, 221 North Salem Street. We're the consulting engineer for Sundance of North Carolina LLC. I'll get specifically into what our proposal is, and that's to subdivide these 3 parcels into 8 lots. That is the purpose. They're going to do shared driveways for every 2 lots, and that is the reason for the conditions for just 4 driveways for fronting along Salem Church Road. We are not in agreement with the recommendation to add improvements along Salem Church Road for this very reason, and that is cost. Carl Helton, who is the owner and developer with Sundance, he will come up and speak of his vision for these properties, and it's to make them more affordable for sale than your typical development project for a subdivision. Plus, the cost is really related to the improvements, and I'll speak to this, along Salem Church Road. Salem Church Road right now currently sits above a ditch section as well as a good portion of the property itself on these lots. So to improve Salem Church Road with curb and gutter and sidewalk to build that ultimate section, really that would require filling. I'm not sure about what that amount is, but there's really not a lot of available borrow material on site. So really we might be looking at an import. Again, that's a cost issue. Using curb and gutter section brings storm drainage into play, again, which is increasing cost. And again, I just want to reiterate that Carl will speak on that. Related to the King property, which is to the west, they did bring it up in our neighborhood meeting. I did receive an email from Miss Karen King. She's here. Her parents live on that property. Evidently, they've experienced some runoff issues. Our solution to basically resolve some of those runoff issues basically is to work with NCDOT to modify the ditch section. That ditch section, I apologize, I don't have any pictures that I could put on screen, but I do have some handouts if you're interested that I can show you. If you want those, would you like to see them?
Put them up.
Off last week on vacation, so I was out there diligently this morning to
Thank you.
take some pictures.
Exactly. There you go. Thank you.
The first sheet basically was taken from IMAPS. It shows the outlined in blue, the 3 parcels that the Salem Church Road parcels. Outlined in red to the east is basically an outline of the house of the King residence. You can see the numbering. I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those represents the photos on the next page. You can see photo number 1 on page 2. Basically, that shows the front of the westernmost lot. And you can see there's not much of a ditch section there. And then as you move to photo number 2, you can see a little bit more pronounced ditch in front of the center lot. But then when you go to photo 3 and 4 on the last page, photo 3 is the ditch along the King property, and really there's not much of a ditch there at all. And photo number 4 is basically a shot of the little sliver of the King property, which is right here. And basically you can see there's a driveway pipe under there, under that little, looks like almost like they might use it for a gravel road to their residence. There's a pipe under there, but that is partially buried and overgrown. So really our proposal to handle any kind of stormwater and runoff is to, again, work with DOT. It would require their permission. They basically control ditch line to ditch line, require an encroachment agreement I have not reached out to them yet, but I will as part of this process to work with them to, again, modify the ditch section. And you can see by the topo on the first page, all this runoff basically drains from the north western corner of the site, and basically it drains from basically almost lot to lot. So there's really not a whole lot of water, in my opinion, that is going from the rear of these parcels to the ditch. We hope to resolve that as part of this development. I think it's going to be very costly, basically, to construct and improve Salem Church Road. So we are in disagreement with, and we do not want to volunteer with that recommendation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Carl and let him speak to his vision.
Thank you, Chairman, and the planning board. I used to sit on that board as town council, and we had meetings that went to 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, so I know how you feel. You'd like to get out of here.
So can you state your full name, please?
I'm Carl Helton. I live at the 505 East Chatham Street in Apex. I've been here since 1988. I built Perry Farm Subdivision, Kelly Glen, and Sugarland Run. And those, back when I came here, were affordable subdivisions, affordable houses. I'm paying as much for lots now as we used to sell a house for. And when I come upon this property, I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity to get some lots to where we can get some houses that some people can afford to buy. Everybody can't live in an $800,000-$900,000 house or $1 million house. Another thing that attracted me to this property, and I don't know how to run this thing, but anyway, if you notice at the back of these yards, people can have, and what one lady I've already showed the property to, she said maybe I could have a little garden out back. And these lots are real deep. But the biggest thing is if we have to spend a lot on, the sidewalks, curb and guttering and stuff there. If you leave Davis Drive down by the church and start down Salem Church Road, you will see very little curb and guttering anywhere along that road. It's like the gentleman was talking about the character of a little country road. And you're driving down through there and you're mingling by the strawberry patch and all that. And then all of a sudden you've got a section that's got curb and guttering. There's 70 lots across the street from this property with no curb and guttering. And I know, like you said, they paid a fee in lieu of. And yes, way back when, we used to take fee in lieu of doing things. And then, like you said, it never got done. The money just sits there for some time. So I think it's going to be detrimental for us to do this project if we have to do that, because then I can't build what we wanted to build there. Some single family houses that some people can afford. So I hope you'll consider that when you're making your decision, that that we can leave it the way it is and try to enhance it. We'll make it nice. If you, like I say, you go back to Perry Farms, Kelly Glen, Sugarland Run, all the subdivisions I've done, you go through them now, they're nice. Mr. Royal used to live in Brittany Trace and houses we did over there. And I mean, we definitely leave everything a lot nicer than we found it. So thank you very much for your time.
So with that, I'll just close with this. You never like to come up here and say no to a condition, but in this case, it's with reason, it's with purpose, it's what Carl envisions for these lots. So we just appreciate your consideration of our request. If you have any other questions, I'm certainly here to. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you have a proposed site plan for the lots layout, the units layout?
I do not. I mean, I've done something conceptual. I mean, we are, proposing these as what they call exempt subdivisions, meaning that we could, if we do get our rezoning and we do not have to do things of buffering or those natures that would bring an administrative approval into play, we would be able to just record lots and basically submit for building permit. And that is our goal.
Because it's hard to conceptualize 8 units on this parcel. You know, how will it be laid out? Like, I'm having a hard time visualizing that.
Well, you basically have about 450 feet of frontage. So you just divide that 450 by 8. We might have to do a recombination before we, on a couple of the lot lines. But our vision is to, like I said, be maybe 52, 53 feet per lot to make up that total.
Would the front of the house's frontage would be Salem Church?
Houses are planned and what we desire to front Salem Church Road with shared driveway for every 2 lots.
Oh, shared driveways. Okay,
Yes.
got it. Okay.
You'd have wanted to do 4 driveways, so.
Well, Carl, we can't hear you. Come on
it
up.
would be
Come on up. We can't hear you, Carl.
Can't hear you.
Well, there are 4 driveways existing on these 3 existing parcels. So we're in agreement that we do not want to exceed that number.
So you reuse the curb cuts that are there.
There's no curb. These are ribbon paved streets. So they're just gravel roads right now, driveways rather.
Where are you pulling sewer from?
The sewer existing, there's a manhole right here, right at this intersection. There's another one that is further down. I think it's right off the King property. I've looked at the topo. I haven't looked at as-built information on the manholes, but we will basically extend sewer from this manhole across the frontage, which is the reason why we're not proposing a buffer along the street frontage.
So if you're trenching for sewer and revising the ditch section so you can get adequate drainage from the rear to the front, would it be too much to ask for just sidewalk?
Well, the issue is going to be, in order to put the sidewalk at the correct elevation per the ultimate section, we're going to have to bring in fill. And that's really the issue.
I would like to make a brief comment. My neighborhood was built in the late 90s and has sidewalk internally, but not along the main road. 20 years after it was developed, the town actually came in and put a section of sidewalk there. It's been the greatest addition to our neighborhood. I live in Sugarland Run, which Mr. Helton developed. So it was funny to hear you say that. It was ultimately the town that came in and did that, but it has provided incredible connectivity, because I doubt that back in 1996, when the Upchurches sold their land, that anyone thought about walkability to downtown. But that has been, again, one of the greatest. That's why I'm never moving out of that neighborhood. It's a great neighborhood.
I understand where you're coming from, but like I said, if we put the sidewalk at the ultimate grade, we're going to be doing some filling, and then all that runoff sheet flow from the back of the lot to the front. Now all of a sudden that water can't get to the ditch section, and now we're putting piping underneath sidewalk, and it just creates issues.
Peter, explain to me what. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have 2 quick questions, if that's okay. One is I realize that I do not believe that this qualifies for a conversation with the affordable housing, our affordable housing staff. But I'm wondering if you have thought about having that conversation. Again, also, Mr. Hilton, a huge appreciation for the development that had, that you brought into the town. So just wondering, things have changed since you were on this board. So wondering if any consideration has been had to have that conversation with affordable housing staff to make sure that you're in line with again, realizing that this development is not going to meet those standards, but that you're just in line with where the area wants to be. And the juxtaposed to that, I think, is, I think that would be helpful to sort of I understand what you're trying to do, but I think that would give the teeth to showing that, like, yes, this is what we want to do. And I then want to come to the board and go, remember that slippery slope I talked about last time? Here it is. and if the benefit is affordable housing, I'm gonna say, we just voted on that slippery slope back there. It seems like this would be a valid another slippery slope to walk down if that's where we're going. So I wonder if you're having this conversation with affordable housing, just to make sure you're in alignment with what the goals are for affordable housing. We do have a policy now. Yay.
I can let you know, we have not had that conversation. I mean, Carl and I, we can certainly, after this meeting, have that conversation to see if that's something that he desires to do.
Mr. Hilton? I know your history with the town.
I'm not really, when I say affordable housing, I'm saying like when we started in 1988. No, I'm not planning on, like the group before us, they're talking about houses as $1.3 million, $1.5 million. I'm trying to do something here where we can sell a house for $600,000 or something like that. I don't know where that number is, that it's affordable and it's not affordable, but it's a whole lot of less or more affordable than everything else that we're building right now in
Absolutely.
Apex.
No, and so again, just because think the affordable housing plan has just been adopted, and so my suggestion, just a suggestion, take it for what you will, is I think if you have that conversation, I think that if you look at the plan, I think the idea of the plan is actually to bring online many more of the developments that you brought online. It is to ensure that the Kelly Glenns and the Sugar Lands, that they are in existence. And I think if you have that conversation with affordable housing when you go to town council, that's just an additional sort of notch in your belt to go, we don't qualify, but we've been talking with affordable housing and we are 100, because I really believe that you are, and I know you don't have those numbers and you don't need to have those numbers because that development was very different. But I think that, I don't know where this board's going to vote, but I think that if you go in with having those numbers, because I really think that's where you're going, and having that conversation with the affordable housing staffer, with Michael, that's just going to help when you go to council and they say, what is the community benefit? Well, they're going to be all in for it. We're providing affordable housing and we're in alignment. It looks very differently than when you sat on this board. And so I just wanted to, propose that, take that for what you will. I think that you're in 100% alignment.
Don't mean to interrupt you, but I think already what we're paying for this property has already got me out of probably that bracket. Because, everybody here knows what land cost is in Apex now, and every day it's more. But we will definitely do that and look and see if it's something that can be done. But we will have that meeting.
It's not required. I want to be clear. Staff, back me up. It's not required for this project. I'm just saying that you're right. This is not going to be the $200,000, $150,000.
They're not going to be $200,000 house.
Right. No. And the affordable housing units are not likely to be that in the future either, just where we are. It is, but the idea is the same of bringing more Kelly Glenns online. That idea is the same. And so while that's not required for this project, I think that if you had that going into council, that's just an extra notch in your belt.
We can commit to having that conversation with them for sure.
Definitely.
To see where we stand.
Yeah.
We can commit to that.
There may be some money out there somewhere that we can, but
there might be. I can't speak to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Peter.
Yes.
I don't know that I get behind that statement about the sidewalk not being at the right elevation. I'm just looking at the adjoining subdivision, the Cary subdivision, not the Glen, because that has curb and gutter, but the other one, I think it's called
Trace.
the Trace. they have that. They have sidewalk that's following grade. It goes even below the road. So I don't know that I buy that. I mean, maybe you have a great point, but there's got to be a way to do sidewalk, and it's not that expensive, but the town gets so much, especially when we approve that multifamily development, you know, an eighth of a mile to the east of here that I think has some commercial components. And there is actually some, you know, commercial space, flex space over there. There's so much value to having that connection, including to the Glennet West High, which has internal sidewalk on both streets. There's value there to the town.
I'm not disagreeing that sidewalk connections aren't valued. And I mean, if it was a matter of us probably putting sidewalk in at grade, at existing grade, I don't think that's something that, I'm not going to speak for Carl, but I think that's probably doable. But what if you have to start raising grade? Remember, when you put your curb and gutter, you know that you're coming up at least 5 inches from edge of pavement. And then you got to carry that out at 2% to your side for your sidewalk.
I guess that's my point.
And that's going to bringing in fill.
And I'm with you, and I don't refute what you're saying,
Yeah.
but if you're not doing curb and gutter, there's still a way to do sidewalk independent if you're doing a fee and loop for the other street improvements. You know, I'm not going to speak out both sides of my mouth. I just,
Sure.
on the last case, I'm very much in favor of the rural character of Castleberry Road. This is a different, Salem Church is, you know, connected to that is an NCDOT road, but it's connected to more of an arterial system that's interconnected to North Salem Street and over to Center, or Davis, that's right. It's a different classification, I believe. I see value in curb and gutter, but I also see what you guys are doing with trying to keep. Have you put a dollar sign behind these improvements? Do you know like what that fee and lieu would be?
I do not.
I
mean, I'll state here. I mean, right now we're against even paying a fee in lieu. We're against improvements, like I said, related to the cost that's going to put on, the additional cost that that's going to put on these lots. I mean, what Carl's trying to do is to make these lots as affordable as possible for people who might not be able to live in this community, the Apex community. So every dollar means something. I mean, I can't state, you know, what that dollar amount is, but, you know, I can certainly, you know, figure that out. So what I would need to do first, I don't mean to cut you off, I would want to get some, you know, some survey information along the frontage to see what that grade change really is and what fill needs to be added. It may be a little, it may be a lot. I think that I've walked it today. There's portions where I know the existing grade of the property, the parcel is below Salem Church Road. Then there's other portions where it comes up a little bit. Whether that balances out, I don't believe it does. But, you know, that's just my opinion on basically observation. And you know as well as I do, sometimes your eyes lie to you, you know, out there in the field. But I just think it's going to take more than what we think.
So as well, like I'm not entirely convinced either. And to piggyback also off Alyssa's comment earlier, I don't live in Sugarland, but like I live adjacent, I'm in Justice Heights, and like I walk those sidewalks like almost daily with my dog, and like it's such a valuable thing for me. And also, you know, you have the sidewalk that currently exists at Tahoe Glen, and you have the sidewalk on the other side of this down Salem Church, but then you also have, you know, I think like Laurel Park Elementary down the road. And I'm thinking about the towns like, you know, safe routes to schools. And I really think that there's a huge value in doing that because you just have so many people that would utilize that, not just your property, but like everything adjacent.
I guess I hear what you're saying. I hear what y'all are saying. But if that's the case, then why wasn't sidewalk built on the opposite side for the townhomes? I mean, it begs the question.
And if we're going to arbitrarily decide that sidewalks and curb and gutters are needed in one place and not another, character versus.
Well, on the other thing, I was gonna say, we've been trying to get sidewalks on Chatham Street forever. Because every morning we got kids walking down through there going to Balcom Elementary School. Well, if you look here, when they come out and go down 450 feet, the sidewalk stops. and there's gonna be another 400 feet with no sidewalk going through the swamp to get over to the, just a little bit on the turn going into the trace. So I guess people can walk down the side, just kind of walking back and forth, but the purpose, you know, to me, is a sidewalk is to go somewhere. Well, here you don't have nowhere to go. It's just gonna come down and a dead end road. So that's, I mean, I'd rather pay a fee and put one on Chatham Street, something that's gonna get used. But this sidewalk probably will never be used. When I was sitting on the board, they wanted the sidewalk at Tingen Road. People still walk in the middle of the road. They don't even use the sidewalk. They walk down the road. So, you know, I'm just saying, if we need to do something, let's do it that makes it work, you know. That's all I'm saying. It's gonna just about make the thing not doable. I mean, I've got already quite a bit of money in a deposit, and I'm just about to the point, you know, just walk away. Just give the man my deposit, and you got a double wide mobile home there, another house that's about to fall down, and the other one's got a barn and a shed, and I'm trying to make it just a nice place to live for 8 families. So.
Is the right of way there?
I'm sorry?
Is the right of way, is there gonna be enough designated space for sidewalk in the future if the town decided to come along and foot the bill to do that? If they see that there's enough, if there's enough reason to do that, is there enough lot depth to have the sidewalk? Or is it just sidewalks altogether would just kill the entire project?
Well, I wanted to back the houses up, you know, I don't want them like, you know, New York, wherever. You know, we wanted to set them back and have a little bit more front yard and have a yard instead of a big buffer there. But again, sure, there's probably enough room. That's what I was alluding to before. The lots are deep, but then they're not going to fit everything else. So
There'll be a town of Apex sewer easement that's going to run along the front to sewer these lots when we extend the sewer. I mean, there would not be a problem to include a slope easement of some kind.
Here's where I'm going with that. As we see these huge projects come in where we have, 30, 40, 100 acre, and what we request of the developer to do, and yet we have a place where we have 4 driveways. And we want somebody like Carl to have to foot the bill for that type of infrastructure. Meanwhile, you look to the left and right where you have hundreds of townhomes with short little sections, and they can afford to do it. At some point, we kill the small developer. And I think that's what you're looking at here. I mean, what else is going to go there?
With that said,
there's not really much. I mean, it's better. I know Carl can build a much better product than what's there now. Not that there's anything wrong with the standard of living that people have there, but I know when he walks away, it's going to look good.
With the track record.
Yeah.
And
I just think we get caught up sometimes in some of this stuff, and I think if it's something that the town wants to do, maybe the town can kind of help out.
Yeah, in regard to the question about costs, and that came up earlier, the planning level estimate of $250 a foot for 450 feet of frontage. With 8 lots, that adds about $14,000 to each lot in terms of just sidewalk construction. That's assuming $250 a foot, which is a pretty high amount for, when it's actually a developer constructing it. But I do want to be clear, when you approve zoning, you approve increased density, and you don't get these kind of improvements, you don't get sidewalk, it makes it much more difficult, much more expensive for the town to come back later and construct. You can certainly try and get more right-of-way and more easements dedicated ahead of time, but in the future, you're talking about staff time, and you're also talking about owners that are going to be there in the future. You're going to have 8 families living in there, and if the town did want to build a sidewalk in the future, not all of them may be happy about the disruption to the front of their property when they're living there. So those are some of the things to consider. I do understand the argument about smaller parcels and trying to promote, more affordable type homes. But we also have a responsibility to the overall community to provide connectivity. These people that want to move into developments and be able to walk to their destinations, and you end up with these gaps along these roadways. We get a lot of complaints from people about these gaps.
So Russell, with all due respect, I appreciate that. You know, I'm here for the connectivity. And the real conversation, with all due respect, is this juxtaposition. Like, that's the real conversation, is that we and this has come before us before, is that if we are making demands, if we want affordable housing, that sliver, that profit margin is so small. As Robert just said, every little ounce is going to count. And so the town, we as the board, have to make decisions, have to make tough decisions about what's more important now in that give and take, what's more important now and what are the benefits. Because while connectivity is absolutely in our plan, we literally just voted to not include connectivity. We literally voted a few weeks ago to not include connectivity. We have to remain consistent, or when we don't, we have to go back and we have to have something to lean on. And if we say that we want affordable housing, we are going to have to, as a community, have real conversations about what that means. We might not be able to have solar panels on every house and affordable housing. What does that mean? Are both of those a priority for the community? Yes. What is more important in this moment? That's the conversations we have to have. And I don't think it's really fair to put one above the other, because they're all important. We've just heard that connectivity is important. We get that, what's important in this moment right now. And I think those are really important conversations for the town to have. And I will be honest, which is why I'm encouraging our friends to go to the Affordable Housing Board so that they can go, look, this is what we're trying, because right now we know we are working with a gentleman who has built homes in this community that folks live in on this board, and we know what the quality is. And yes, I absolutely want sidewalks. Yes, I absolutely want those connectivities. I want all of it. And if we can't have it, what is our priority? And I know what my priority would be. I don't know what everybody else's priority would be. I think that's a question for this board to decide, and then a question that goes to council. But I think bringing all of those, that these are the priorities, what's the most important needs to be what's surface. And I'm not really sure that they're all important. Connectivity is important, affordable housing is important. What is the most important in this moment at this time?
Yeah, and then the question before staff is not about affordable housing versus minimum street improvements. It's a question of minimum street improvements we would normally see on development versus a developer saying they want to provide a quote unquote more affordable product. It's not technically affordable housing. If staff is presented with a truly, affordable housing product, if that's what they're proposing, we could have those conversations and compare that and provide a response. But I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Right, and I absolutely understand that, and which is why I suggested.
Russell, to the question about placing sidewalk at the right-of-way line, because this would be a DOT-controlled right-of-way, I believe the town of Apex maintains sidewalks even if it's a DOT street. So the encroachment would go to the town of Apex, or to DOT for the town of Apex sidewalk in the DOT right-of-way.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a three-party encroachment, so the developer is providing that. They would construct the sidewalk. We would accept maintenance of the sidewalk, and it would be it could be within the right of way, or it could, in the case where it's a ditch section, it may or may not fit within the right of way. It kind of depends. So in that case, we would at least need to have like a public sidewalk easement outside of that right of way.
The concern over fill and cut, can it be placed at grade outside of the flow line of the ditch?
You need to be able to convey water outside of the sidewalk. We don't want to have a situation where you're sheet flowing water over top of the sidewalk. You're going to have sediment and other kinds of problems. So as long as you've got a ditch, and I try not to engineer too many things through zoning conditions, because we don't quite know what we're dealing with until it's laid out. But we would at least want to make sure that the ditch is able to convey water and not sheet flow over the sidewalk.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Do we have anybody here for public comment? Please, have you signed in yet, ma'am? Yes. Please state your name for the record.
My name's Karen King of the King property. I live at 5612 Woodard Lane in Raleigh, and my mother and my father-in-law, Tommy and Nancy King, they reside at 1605, which is the piece right to the east of the property. I'm the one that has expressed the concern about the runoff from the properties now. Nothing has been addressed in years about it, and the ditch needs to be cleaned out. Since this process has started, Peter has worked with me to determine, okay, these are the areas that we're going to do to fix it. So it's not a concern now that, oh, the project's going to be pouring, as it's designed now, it's going to be pouring more water on our site. Is we're designing the project to correct the existing problem of the water running from the building site onto my in-laws' property. So I just wanted to express to y'all that they're working with us to solve this problem in a way that I thought was commendable. And if anybody has any questions, the house has been in the family since it was built in the mid-1960s. So we're very familiar with the area, things like that. We're all for this development. What's there now can definitely be taken down and used for a much better purpose. Because as y'all know, things are getting expensive, and it's not like it was in the mid-1960s when the original houses were built. But I thank y'all so much for your time, and just wanted to let y'all know that, you know, we think that's the best use for the property.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you foresee a possible construction of a sidewalk on that property?
On the King's property? No. So you're going to have the sidewalk in front of their property, and then just as long as absolutely nothing, and you'll have to walk on the road past my in-laws' place. Yes, sir.
And again, I'm not trying to play broker any deal here, but
No.
if there was a situation where sewer would have to extend across your in-laws' property and a ditch section were to be revised or revigorated to its original design threshold, could sidewalk ride over top of that easement, since there's a potential that it's already being affected by grading?
No, I think because the grade slopes so much, and especially to the area referred to as the swamp, that's the easternmost part of the property. There's just too much. But I thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
King.
you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment section? All right, I'm gonna close the public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
I would make a motion to approve rezoning case 23CZ10 as submitted by the applicant.
I have a motion from Tina. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Heath?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right. 23CZ10 passes unanimously. Amanda is going to talk to us about a public hearing and possible motion regarding case 23CZ12, the Sweetwater PUD amendment.
Yes, so I'm sure you're all familiar with where Sweetwater is, along 64. So, so this is actually a very small parcel. It's actually two parcels. One is in case you're wondering, one is just a little sliver along Little Jim that's hardly perceptible unless you zoom in. It's about just under an acre. Currently zoned plan unit development, conditional zoning, and the proposal is a revision to that PUD. To orient you, it's on the west side of Little Jim Lane, south of Corbank Street. North of Corbank Street is the commercial and mixed use portion of Sweetwater. And then to the west, you have the undeveloped part of Smith Farm PUD, which you just saw at your last meeting. The land use map calls for mixed use, which the proposed PUD amendment is still consistent with that land use classification. So the applicant held their neighborhood meeting on April 18th, and you have that report. There's no increase in proposed residential density, so we didn't need to request a letter of impact from Wake County Public Schools. And to give you a little background, I was on vacation as well last week when this was another staff person put this together for me, and I would have had the map. But in your staff report, you have some maps that show the history of this PUD amendment and where this parcel was originally split between non-residential and residential development. And as the PUD has been amended a couple of times, and in the last amendment in 2017, at that time, Core Banks here was known, the location was known, and when that alignment was defined more precisely on the PUD, the land use designation changed from partially non-residential and residential to all residential. So the developer is wishing to change the land use to non-residential for this small tract. There's no more residential units allowed in Sweetwater. They've maxed out their density. And in order to increase the density, you'd have to have the approval of every property owner in Sweetwater, which you can imagine would be quite challenging for over 400 property owners. So the proposed uses for this parcel are less than the commercial uses allowed north of Core Bank Street, primarily focusing on retail and service oriented businesses. Includes park as well. The applicant has also reduced the building height. 62 feet, 5 stories is the maximum allowed north of Core Banks, and so they are proposing a 39-foot 2-story height limit, which is consistent with the townhomes that are nearby. And they are proposing that the buffer along the adjacent vacant Smith Farm property be a 10-foot type A buffer at most, if a buffer is required by the UDO. So it could be that this is commercial and Smith Farm is commercial. They could be developed together potentially or separately. So that summarizes the proposed changes to the PUD. The rezoning was exempt from meeting with the EAB since it's less than 1 acre. Planning staff is recommending approval of the rezoning as proposed by the applicant. The rezoning is consistent with the 2045 land use map and is reasonable and in the public interest in that it will allow for non-residential use of the subject property with a more limited list of permitted uses and a lower building height to maintain compatibility. And the overall Sweetwater PUD is maxed out its permitted residential density. So this proposed rezoning will allow for development of the property that will increase the tax base and provide services to nearby residential uses. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Amanda? Thank you, Amanda. The applicant care to speak?
I wanted to ask where was Sweetwater, but.
That's right, that's funny. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. My name is Jacob Hudson. I'm representing the C Group, working on the rezoning here for Experience One Homes and KEP One Holdings. Amanda summed it up pretty well. Fairly simple, almost like this last parcel was intended to be rezoned last time as non-residential, but it was kind of just overlooked almost. So they've maxed out their residential in Sweetwater overall, and we're looking at just adding a small, less than 1 acre, another kind of piece of more mixed use for this site. So that's pretty much sums it up on our end. Wanted to see if you guys had any questions for us.
Do you have any users interested in it?
Not right now, but based off of the interest that's kind of been buzzing around phase 10, which is directly north with the Harris Teeter site and everything, they're certainly looking to capitalize on another small, office or I think any sort of retail or something like that. There is interest. So.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sir. I don't see any public comments, so I'm not gonna go ahead and open it. I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and possible motion.
Were there any emails?
There was one email that was forwarded to the board about a week and a half ago.
I'll make a motion to approve as, I think this one's pretty straightforward if I'm not mistaken.
I have a motion from Keith. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion from Keith and a second from Tina. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. And we have no new business, so I need one more motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Royal. Do I have a second? All right. So, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.